Chapter 2754. In his days, Ji Tianqing felt as if he was in a dream. He had lost his body, leaving only his invisible soul floating above the myriad worlds. It might have been tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. During such a long period of time, his soul had always been at the top of the heavens, looking down at the trichiliocosm and the endless void. He watched with his own eyes as one barren and weak star after another gradually grew stronger. Then, those stars gathered the 5 elements and received the protection of the divine light from the heavenly Tao. Then, those stars went from being barren and withered to being reborn, and countless living beings emerged. Thousands of living beings continued to grow stronger, creating their own civilizations, building one kingdom after another, blooming with brilliant light. However, as time passed, those worlds that were once prosperous to the extreme died one after another. The billions of living beings on the stars continued to wither, finally returning to coldness and loneliness. As for those enormous stars, they began to shatter one after another and fall apart. Either they turned into star fragments, becoming shooting stars that cut through the void, leaving behind their final brilliance. Or they turned into broken, desolate, and dead stars, waiting to be destroyed. Or the next generation of new life. Just like that, Ji Tianqing watched from the top of the heavens for hundreds of thousands of years. He watched the stars flicker and extinguish, the rise and fall of the myriad races in the world. He watched things turn in the opposite direction when they reach an extreme. He watched the cycle of prosperity and decline. He saw through the vicissitudes of time and all the vanity. During this period, no matter how the endless stars in the void changed, there were only 3,000 stars that were enveloped by the divine light of the heavenly Tao and had wisdom, life, and civilization. Not one more, not one less. When the long period of time was about to end, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but raise his head to take a look, because he knew that this dream was about to end. And before the dream ended, he really wanted to know what was above the trichiliocosm and the boundless starry sky. Then, he saw that there seemed to be an invisible barrier above his head. It was like a transparent crystal, but also like a frozen water surface. On the ice surface further away, or rather, above the sky, there were 3 huge suns floating. They formed horns on each other and stood in a tripartite balance. 2 of them shone with golden light, even more dazzling than the sun. As for the other one, it was hazy with 7 colors, making it seem both real and illusory. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and he couldn't help but wonder. 3? Why are there 3 of them? How could there be 3 of them? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he left the dream and finally woke up. Phew, Ji Tianqing let out a long breath, as if he had just woken up from a million years of slumber, and opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was the divine golden light that floated in the sky like strands of silk. Even higher up in the sky, there was a golden barrier that covered the sky. It was like a ball of light that covered a radius of 100,000 miles. Outside the golden ball of light, there was an endless amount of red magma that surged violently. Seeing this familiar scene, Ji Tianqing felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and a smile appeared on his face. My guess was right. I ended up back here. He could already tell that this was the inner part of the 5 elements world, the core of the world deep in the Earth's core. That was right. When he fought with the God King's avatar, he was certain that he would lose. What kind of joke was this? He did not even reach the celestial deity realm. What right did he have to defeat the God King's avatar? Even if that was just a God King's avatar, his strength weakened to the extreme after descending into the mortal world. But 1% of a peak God King's strength was also comparable to a Divine Lord powerhouse. A Divine Lord was absolutely invincible in the mortal world. Therefore, Ji Tianqing was bound to lose. Furthermore, he would be beaten to death by the God King's avatar. But he was not afraid, nor was he worried. He still fought with the God King's avatar for several hours. Why? Because he had the greatest reliance, which was the Five Elements world. He had long merged into one with the Five Elements world. As long as the Five Elements world was not destroyed, he would never die. Moreover, he still had the Heaven-Mending Pearl, this divine artifact. Even if the Heaven-Mending Pearl's power recovered was less than 10% of a king-level divine artifact. But for that God King's avatar to want to blast the Heaven-Mending Pearl and annihilate his divine soul, it was also absolutely impossible. As long as his divine soul was not destroyed, he would not die. This way, Ji Tianqing's life had two guarantees. What was there to fear? Now, he woke up inside the world's core, which verified this point. Ji Tianqing straightened his waist and sat up. Reaching out his left hand, he grasped the sword of burial of heaven in his hand. Without needing to use his eyes to see, his divine sense immediately sensed that the sword of burial of heaven also recovered to its original state. He lowered his head and looked at his body, sizing up a few glances around. His body completely recovered, no different from before. The only difference was that he was currently a half-step celestial deity realm. Unlike before, it was 99 times of a peak true god, strengthened to the limit. The difference between the two was that he was ascending to the divine world now. After going through the Ascension Pool's baptism, he would break through to level 1 celestial deity realm. If it were before, when he ascended to the divine world, he would directly break through to level 5 celestial deity realm. This made Ji Tianqing feel a little disappointed in his heart. However, this doesn't matter too much either. If I devour another 100 stars, I can still strengthen to the limit. Apart from this, there was one more thing that also made his heart ache a little. Even though he revived inside the world's core, his spatial ring was gone. It must have been destroyed when the Divine King's clone killed him. Even though his most important secrets and treasures were stored in the Sword of Burial of Heaven. But there were hundreds of millions of source stones stored in the spatial ring. And the divine-level resources that he plundered from various major starfields were worth at least 1 trillion. With those source stones and divine-level resources, it was enough for him, Yun Yao, and the others to cultivate for thousands of years. But now, everything in the spatial ring was destroyed. Ji Tianqing sighed and murmured, "Forget it, no matter how many source stones and divine-level resources there are, they are just worldly possessions." If worldly possessions were gone, at most, he could just search for more. As long as he was still alive and his strength was still there, it was his greatest reliance. I wonder if the Divine King's clone left planet Heaven Trader after killing me? Yao Yao, Cuckoo, the 2 children, Bai Long, Qian Yu, and the others should still be in the 5 Elements world, waiting for my news, right? I've been there for so long and there's no news. They must be very worried. Ji Tianqing put away the Sword of Burial of Heaven and frowned. However, with Yao Yao and Cuckoo's temperament, if they can't contact me for so long, they will most likely leave the 5 Elements world and go to planet Heaven Trader to help me. After the Divine King's clone killed me, if I meet them again, the consequences will be unimaginable. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing was full of worry. He couldn't care about anything else and hurriedly channeled his energy into the golden mountain under his feet. Through the world vein, he left the world's core. Swoosh! In the next moment, he appeared out of thin air in the north of the divine ruins, outside the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. He hurriedly took out the small golden tower and disappeared from the spot in a flash. After returning to the 5th level of the divine tower, he hurriedly entered the 6th level to distort space and time. However, the scene of distorted space and time made his expression change on the spot. Chapter 2755. In the huge distorted space-time, there was dead silence. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense and searched every corner, but he did not see a single person. Yun Yao was not here, Ji Ku was not here, the white dragon was not here, and the 2 children were not here either. In fact, even the 4 divine beasts were nowhere to be seen. Ji Tianqing's heart surged with deep uneasiness and worry. He had a premonition that the worst outcome that he had guessed had probably already happened. Thus, he hurriedly left the divine tower and took out the source stone jade slip. He sent a message to everyone, including the 4 divine beasts. After a long wait of an hour, he still did not receive a reply. All the messages that he sent out were like stones sinking into the sea. Ji Tianqing's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. His expression and eyes were solemn to the extreme. Swoosh! He hurriedly used the power of the world and left the 5 elements world. A moment later, he appeared in the dark and cold void. Fortunately, the 5 elements world was still in place and did not move at all. But what surprised Ji Tianqing was that the sacred golden light that enveloped the 5 elements world actually disappeared. The divine light barrier of the 5 elements world is related to the ancient goddess Yaoguang. How could it suddenly disappear? Ji Tianqing was full of doubts. He sensitively sensed that something big must have happened. Thus, he circled around the dim 5 elements world and flew at top speed in the void. 8 days later, he stopped in the void, his eyes fixed on the 5 elements world, and landed at the center point. That's right, the golden light barrier that enveloped the 5 elements world had indeed disappeared. In other words, the 5 elements world had lost its seal, and at the same time, it had also lost its special protection. However, the golden light barrier did not completely disappear. Somewhere in the 5 elements world, there was an extremely small light spot. Ji Tianqing was full of doubts and flew towards that light spot. A day later, he arrived in front of the light spot. Only then did he see clearly that it was a ball of sacred golden light with a radius of 90 feet. In the pure and flawless golden ball of light, a figure was sleeping soundly. It was a figure with a graceful figure and a beautiful face that could topple nations. The familiar waist-length hair, the moon-white dress, and the face that was like a masterpiece made Ji Tianqing's body tremble. Yao Yao! Ji Tianqing instantly recognized that the sleeping figure in the light ball was Yun Yao. However, Yun Yao's eyes were closed and she was still unconscious. Could it be that Yao Yao was also killed by the deity king's clone? She was reborn just like me, resurrected in the divine light fortress? At this moment, she's like me in the past. She's spending a long period of time in the dreamscape and looking down at the myriad of worlds? In just a few breaths of time, Ji Tianqing guessed the reason. As it turned out, his guess was correct. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others must have gone to planet raiding and met the deity king's avatar. Ji Tianqing suddenly felt a sharp pain in his heart. He was extremely anxious. If Yao Yao is resurrected here, then what about Ku? What about our children? What about the white dragon and the 4 divine beasts? He murmured with a cold face. He hurriedly controlled the power of the world to search in the 5 elements world. He had to find the others, especially Ku and the 2 children. Whether he went to heaven or hell, he had to find them. However, things did not go as he wished. After an entire day, Ji Tianqing searched all over the 5 elements world and searched all the places where the others might appear. However, he still could not find a single one. Planet raiding. There's still planet raiding. In his despair, a thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind as he thought of the star of heaven punishment. That was his last hope. He flew through the void without hesitation and went straight to planet raiding. In order to reach there as quickly as possible, he did not hesitate to consume the remaining power of the world in his body and raised his speed to the limit. 10 days later, Ji Tianqing appeared on planet raiding. After the successive disasters, planet raiding was already in a terrible state. 3 of the 5 continents were destroyed, and the last 2 continents were also in chaos. Of the initial 30 billion people, only about 10 billion were left. More than 80% of the martial gods had died in the war. Only a small number of soldiers and experts had escaped from planet raiding and rushed to planet celestial chaos. Now, planet raiding was truly without a leader. The 10 billion people on the 2 continents had been in chaos and fear. Killings occurred everywhere, the people's hearts were in turmoil, and the war was in full swing. The news of the destruction of the Dharch Palace and the death of the Thearcha's son and the Empress had already spread throughout planet raiding. The surviving people all knew that planet raiding was finished. The more powerful leaders and experts all wanted to escape from planet raiding as soon as possible. However, without enough forces, resources, and battleships, they could not leave at all. As a result, hundreds of great forces broke out into a great battle royale and slaughtered one another. In order to escape from planet raiding and go to their new home, and in order to survive, they did not care about the friendship of their own race and raised their weapons against their own race. Human nature was evil. For survival, benefits, and status, they would be keen on internal strife. No matter in time and space, in any world, for any race, this was the universal truth. After Ji Tianqing arrived at planet raiding, he used the power of the world to check the situation of the 2 continents. In just a few hours, he saw the situation of planet raiding. At the same time, he also received the most important news. The Dharch Palace has been destroyed? Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan are both dead? Ji Tianqing immediately realized that this matter must have something to do with Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others. Therefore, he controlled the power of the world and went to the old site of the Dharch Palace. There used to be an endless sea of clouds thousands of miles high in the sky. Now there were thousands of holes and gaps in the sea of clouds hundreds of thousands of miles wide. Even though 2 months had passed since the war, those holes and gaps had not disappeared. Even the sea within a radius of 300,000 miles under the sky had become a dried-up land that looked like ruins. Countless powerful divine powers were still left in the ruins. The mixed divine power was like a transparent wall that filled the ruins and blocked off the endless seawater around them. In about a year or 2, those mixed divine powers would dissipate. At that time, the sea water in all directions would no longer be obstructed and would drown the ruins. When the sea returned to normal, the traces of the war would also be covered. Ji Tianqing stood in the sea of clouds with his eyes closed. He was releasing his divine sense to cover the surrounding 100,000 miles and carefully investigate. At the same time, he also used the power of the world to protect the ruins. This was because as soon as he arrived, he detected the most familiar auras. First of all, the divine power of the Divine King's clone was the most violent and overbearing. Secondly, there were the auras of Yun Yao and Ji Ku, as well as the auras of Bai Long, Ji Wushuang, and the 3 divine beasts. The facts proved that they had indeed been to the Dharch Palace and had fought here for a long time. The aura of the Divine King's clone was the strongest, which proved that he had fought here and released a powerful divine power. By the time Ji Tianqing found these clues, the answer was already obvious. He immediately guessed that they had most likely died here. Chapter 2756. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and formed a divine art with both hands. Light shadows appeared in front of him. He was using a divine power secret art. Time reversal divine ability. Although this divine power couldn't turn back time, it could use the situation of this world and the chaotic divine power to recreate the original scene. Swoosh. When Ji Tianqing formed the 68th seal, the white light in front of him suddenly condensed. A white light with a radius of 100 feet appeared in front of him like a light screen. Then, the huge light screen showed the blue sea, the blue sky, and the white clouds, showing many fragmented images. As Ji Tianqing cast the art, the fragmented images kept changing. The scene in the image was going against the flow, moving back to 2 months ago. After a while, the images on the light screen moved to 2 months ago. Hundreds of fragmented images immediately appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. He clearly saw that the Dharch Palace hadn't been destroyed yet. thousands of battleships were gathered at the gate, and there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers and guards in the Dharch Palace. Many battleships were loading soldiers and leaving the Dharch Palace. However, Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others led the 4 divine beasts into the Dharch Palace quietly. A fierce battle broke out. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others had won a complete victory. They had killed all the soldiers of the heaven-punishing army and destroyed thousands of battleships. Not long after, Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan appeared one after another. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others surrounded Tian Shu and Yun Shuiyan and severely injured them. The entire Dharch Palace was also destroyed, turning into a desolate ruin. But at this moment the avatar of the Divine King, who was thousands of miles tall, rushed over from the distant sky. His strength was unparalleled, and he easily blocked everyone's joint attack. Then, he seemed to be angered. He killed the glazed fire dragon with a punch and blasted it into powder. Then, he killed the black dragon with a palm strike and blasted it into pieces. Then, he killed Xianyu with a finger strike and blasted it into pieces. Then, the Divine King's avatar used his ultimate divine power, space freezing, explosion. Immediately, Yun Yao, Jiku, Jiwushuang, and Bai Long's bodies collapsed and were torn into pieces. They were turned into hundreds of pieces and killed by the Divine King's avatar one by one. All of them had died. When he saw these scenes, Ji Tianqing was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His eyes turned blood red. He didn't go crazy, nor did he roar. Suppressing the boundless hatred and endless killing intent in his chest, he muttered to himself in a low and hoarse voice, "No matter who you are, even if I have to kill everyone in the God realm, I will tear you to pieces. No matter who the Divine King was. No matter how strong he was, how powerful he was, how high his power and status was. His wife, children, friends, and himself had all been killed by the God King's avatar. If he didn't take revenge for such a blood feud, he wouldn't be a man." After a long time, Ji Tianqing gradually suppressed his anger and killing intent. He stared at the light screen with bloodshot eyes and suddenly thought of a problem. Yun Yao, Jiku, Jiwushuang, and Bai Long had all been killed by the Divine King's avatar. But what about his son, Ji Wuhan and Lan Kuan? Why didn't the Divine King's avatar kill them? Soon, Ji Tianqing saw the result. Lan Kuan couldn't bear the humiliation and self-detonated before the Divine King's avatar could capture it. It was this self-detonation that weakened the Divine King's avatar greatly. Ji Wuhan also fainted. In the end, only the Divine King's avatar, Ji Wuhan, Yun Shuiyan, and Tian Shu were left in the sky. Tian Shu had long been turned into a pile of meat paste and was being protected by the heavily injured Yun Shuiyan. Then, the Divine King's avatar exchanged a few words with her and left with her, Tian Shu, and Ji Wuhan. At this point, Ji Tianqing understood what had happened. He didn't need to guess to know what had happened. The Divine King's avatar must have taken Yun Shuiyan, Tian Shu, and Ji Wuhan to the depths of the void. Ji Tianqing's expression was gloomy. He frowned and analyzed. The Divine King's avatar didn't kill Wuhan and instead took him away. It's most likely because Wuhan is like me. That damned bastard. He wants to bring Wuhan back to the divine realm and nurture him into a sharp blade. He must have guessed that I'm not truly dead and will go to the divine realm to seek revenge sooner or later. Therefore, he used Wuhan as a trump card to deal with me at the critical moment. What a vicious mind. Ji Tianqing analyzed and guessed the Divine King's avatar's scheme. However, this also made him feel slightly relieved. At least, after Wuhan was brought back to the divine realm, his life wouldn't be in danger before he sought revenge on the Divine King. However, it was inevitable that Wuhan would suffer a lot of cruel torment. Ji Tianqing took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He continued to analyze. The Divine King's avatar is already very weak. It's already very difficult for him to bring Wuhan back to the divine realm. He probably won't take Yun Shuiyan and Tian Shu with him. First, it's impossible. Second, Tian Shu's talent is far inferior to my son Wuhan's. When he thought of this, Ji Tianxing was somewhat puzzled. No, if the Divine King's avatar didn't take Yun Shuiyan and her son away, they must have returned to the heaven-punishing planet to recuperate. Why is the heaven-punishing planet without a leader? Rumor has it that Yun Shuiyan and her son are dead? No. There must be a problem here. Out of instinct, Ji Tianxing wanted to go to the void and use the time reversal ability to see what was going on. However, he could only suppress this thought and do something more important first. Resurrect Ji Ku Ji Wushuang, Bai Long and the 4 divine beasts. That's right. Resurrect everyone who had died. He had the heaven-mending pearl, and there were still a few thousand life-saving divine lights left in it. They had the heaven-defying effect of resurrecting the dead. After Ji Ku Ji Wushuang and the others were killed, their corpses, flesh, and divine soul fragments were scattered in the ruins. This was where the Divine Emperor Palace was located, and it had always been a forbidden area for the Heaven Punishers. Ever since the end of the war, no one dared to come here. After all, the billions of Heaven Punishers on the 2 continents had long fallen into chaos and war. How could they care about anything else? This gave Ji Tianxing hope of resurrecting everyone. As long as he could find everyone's corpses and divine soul fragments, he could use the life-saving divine lights to resurrect them. Ji Tianxing didn't waste any time and hurriedly searched the ruins. The reason why this area was filled with everyone's aura and hadn't dissipated after 2 months was because everyone's corpses were still here. Ji Ku Ji Wushuang and the others were all peak true god experts. Even if they were killed, their corpses shattered, and their divine souls shattered, they wouldn't dissipate even after 100 years. Ji Tianxing searched the ruins carefully and quickly found a large amount of flesh, bones, and divine soul fragments. There were his daughter Ji Wushuang, his disciple Bai Long, Qianyu, and Black Dragon. Only Ji Ku, Lan Kuan, and the glazed fire dragon's corpses were not found. Ji Tianxing collected the flesh, bones, and divine soul fragments and analyzed with a serious expression. Lan Kuan would rather die than submit, and he has already self-destructed. His corpses and divine soul no longer exist. Even if I have the life-saving divine lights, I can't do anything. The glazed fire dragon was blasted into dust, and it was the first to be killed. Later, when the Divine King's clone fought with everyone, the aftermath of the battle destroyed the dust and divine soul fragments. As such, Lan Kuan and the glazed fire dragon can't be saved. As for Cuckoo, she has inherited the divine ability of the divine bird phoenix, so she should be able to be reborn. Chapter 2757. Ji Tianxing was a little depressed, and his heart was filled with regret. However, Lan Kuan and the glazed fire dragon could not be saved. He was only a peak true god now, not a powerful divine king. Even if he wanted to revive Lan Kuan and the glazed fire dragon, there was nothing he could do. I hope I can still meet you in my next life. At that time, I will definitely take good care of you and not let you suffer such a tragedy again. Ji Tianxing looked at the ruins with a sorrowful gaze and murmured in his heart. Then, he put away his heavy and sorrowful heart and began the revival plan. The remains of his daughter Wushuang, his disciple White Dragon, Qianyu, and Black Dragon were all mixed together and piled up into a small mountain that was 10 feet tall. After all, Qianyu and Black Dragon had revealed their original bodies before they were killed. After they were killed, the remains that could be preserved until now were only 1/1000th of their original bodies. Ji Tianxing carefully examined the pile of remains and first picked out his daughter Wushuang's remains and divine soul fragments. Within 15 minutes, he finished his selection. His once innocent and extremely cute daughter had now become a pile of bones and flesh that were as fine as sand and 9 divine soul fragments. Ji Tianxing felt extremely guilty, and his heart ached as if it was being cut by a knife. That was his most beloved and most obedient daughter. However, the matter at hand was more important. He restrained his emotions and released the life-saving divine light in the heaven-mending pearl. Swoosh! A sacred white light surged out of his palm and enveloped the pile of bones and divine soul fragments. In order to successfully revive Ji Wuxuang, Ji Tianxing used 100 sets of life-saving divine light. That was the power to revive 100 martial gods. Ji Wuxuang was a peak true god. After she was killed, only this little bit of remains would be left. It would definitely consume 10 times, 100 times more life-saving divine light. The facts proved that Ji Tianxing's estimation was correct. The 100 sets of life-saving divine light enveloped Ji Wuxuang's remains and surged for 4 hours. It was not until 4 hours later that the divine light stopped surging. Within the white light, a petite and cute figure appeared. Her appearance was as beautiful as Yun Yao, and her temperament was innocent and cute to the extreme. She looked like she was only 8 or 9 years old. Her eyes were tightly closed, and she was in a deep sleep. Ji Wuxuang was successfully resurrected. His height, appearance, bloodline, and aptitude were exactly the same as before. Ji Tianxing secretly heaved a sigh of relief, and his heavy heart eased a lot. He knew that although Wuxuang had been resurrected, he was still weak and his divine soul was still in a heavily injured state. She would have to sleep for at least 10 years before she could wake up. As for her injuries, it would take 30 to 40 years for her to recover. It would take 100 years for his strength to recover. But none of this was important. As long as his daughter was alive, it would be a blessing. Ji Tianxing placed the unconscious Wuxuang into the sword world of the burial of heaven and let her sleep in a place where she could heal her injuries. Then, he selected the white dragon's bones and soul fragments from the mountainous sea of consciousness. A quarter of an hour later, the white dragon's bones and divine soul fragments were picked out. The remains of his bones and flesh could fill up a basin, but there were only 8 pieces of his soul. Ji Tianxing released another 100 rays of life-saving divine light, enveloping the white dragon's skeleton. 6 hours later, the white dragon was also successfully revived. Of course, he was also in a comatose state. His divine soul was heavily injured, and his strength was incomparably weak. Ji Tianxing also placed the white dragon into the sword world. Next was to revive Qian Yu and the black dragon. The remaining remains of the two were obviously larger in size and had more distinct characteristics. Of course, Qian Yu had more bones left, and the black dragon had fewer. Ji Tianxing used 120 rays of life-saving divine light to revive Qian Yu. When he revived the black dragon, not only did he use 150 rays of life-saving divine light, he also spent an additional 4 hours. Just like that, a day passed. Those that could be revived were all revived. Ji Tianxing finished casting the spell and placed Qian Yu and the black dragon into the sword world, letting them rest in a deep sleep. Although he was somewhat haggard and exhausted, he did not dare to delay. However, he didn't dare to waste any time. He quickly left the heaven-punishing planet and entered the void. Outside planet Heaven Trader, Ji Tianxing stood in the void somewhere. He looked up at the void and nodded slightly. According to his memory, the passage between the two worlds opened when the Divine King's clone descended to the mortal world was right above his head. Perhaps it was at a height of 30,000 miles, or perhaps it was at a height of 28,000 miles. In short, the error was not big. It should be in that area. After confirming the location, Ji Tianxing used the time reversal divine power again. Swoosh! Soon, a huge light screen with a radius of 1,000 feet appeared in the void in front of him. As he cast the spell, images quickly appeared on the light screen. Although those images were of the dark void, they were somewhat messy and fragmented, and they were changing rapidly. Ji Tianxing was casting the spell to reverse the time 2 months ago. After a full 15 minutes, some dazzling light appeared in the fragmented images. It was dazzling divine light of various colors, and there were many flashes of lightning. After a while, the image that Ji Tianqing wanted to see the most appeared. In the void, there was a gap that was 3,000 kilometers long, and within it, divine light and lightning flashed. That was the passage between the two worlds opened by the Divine King's clone, and it had shrunk by more than half. Before long, the Divine King's clone carried the unconscious Ji Wuhan in his left hand and Dubhe wrapped in golden light in his right hand. He arrived at the passage between the two worlds. Not far behind him, Yun Shuiyan, who was covered in blood, also followed. It was unknown what the Divine King's clone said to her, but she suddenly laughed crazily. Her blood-stained face was filled with unwillingness and despair. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, vaguely guessing the truth. Then, Yun Shuiyan burned herself in unwillingness, turning into a bloody flame that soared into the sky and rushed into the passage between the two worlds. The passage between the two worlds, which had already shrunk, expanded to 5,000 kilometers. Ji Tianqing murmured expressionlessly, "Just as I expected, blood ignition divine transformation. Could it be that the Divine King's clone really brought my son Wuhan and Dubhe back to the God realm?" He was very worried, and he stared at the light screen without blinking. Soon, the Divine King's clone flew toward the passage between the two worlds with Ji Wuhan and Dubhe. The Divine King's clone was about to enter the passage and return to the God realm. But at this moment, a five-colored divine light suddenly lit up in the void not far away, and a passage between the two worlds appeared. Two dark golden dragon claws that blotted out the sky reached out from the passage between the two worlds, violently swatting at the Divine King's clone. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's body stiffened, and his eyes widened in disbelief. A Divine King powerhouse from the Dragon Realm? It actually attacked the Divine King's clone at this critical moment? What is it trying to do? Loot a burning house? Or is it seeking revenge? Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with shock, and his curiosity was at its peak. Then, he saw a dragon claw send the Divine King's clone flying. The other dark golden dragon claw severed the Divine King's clone's left arm and snatched away the unconscious Ji Wuhan. Apart from that, the two dragon claws didn't do anything else, directly retracting into the passage between the two worlds and disappearing. Not long after, the passage between the two worlds disappeared. The Divine King's clone also entered the passage between the two worlds and returned to the God realm. The scene on the light screen dissipated. Ji Tianqing was stunned on the spot, silent for a long time. Chapter 2758. West Sea Dragon King? East Sea Dragon King? North Sea Dragon King? Or Golden Dragon King? Or maybe that old ruffian dragon? Ji Tianqing stood in the air, frowning as he pondered. Which Dragon King took Ji Wuhan away? Although it was two dark golden dragon claws that attacked the Divine King's clone and snatched Ji Wuhan, that didn't mean anything. The Dragon Kings that Ji Tianqing mentioned could all have that ability. That was why he pondered with a serious expression and analyzed the situation based on his memories. When Kenshin left the Five Elements world and ascended to the upper realm, he didn't directly ascend to the God realm. Under a freak combination of factors, he actually ascended to the Dragon realm. This seemed to be related to the space-time roulette. But the space-time roulette was destroyed long ago, so the result was no longer important. The Dragon realm and the God realm were two independent eternal worlds. Although the two worlds were connected and had a few special passages, it wasn't something that could be passed through by ordinary people. That was why Kenshin cultivated in the Dragon realm for more than 200 years. He also had enough understanding of the Dragon realm's situation. There were many Divine King powerhouses in the Dragon realm, even more than in the God realm. There were more than 1,000 of them. However, there were only 5 peak Divine Kings that could rule the 4 seas of the God realm and Middle-earth. Ji Tianqing knew 3 of the 5 peak Divine Kings. He had never met 2 of them before, but he had heard of them and had a basic understanding of them. As for the 3 peak Divine Kings that he knew, their relationship with him was a little complicated. One of them called him brother, and the other was a gentleman's friend. As for the guy that he called Old Ruffian Dragon, he was both a friend and a foe. It couldn't be helped, the Old Ruffian Dragon was too capricious and temperamental. His attitude towards him was the kind that admired and appreciated each other, but he was also very jealous and hated him, always going against him. Because of this, his relationship with the Old Ruffian Dragon also caused many powerhouses in the Dragon Realm to be confused. If he was in danger, the Old Ruffian Dragon would be the happiest. Not only did he not lend a helping hand, he even mocked and ridiculed him, causing trouble for him, and even adding insult to injury. However, if he really encountered great danger and was about to die, the Old Ruffian Dragon's draconic personality would immediately split apart. While mocking him, they killed all his enemies and helped him out of danger. It was simply, she was talking about villains, but her hands were doing something to save him. The Grand Dragon's personality had split. The Western Sea Dragon King and the Eastern Sea Dragon King have always kept a low profile, not showing themselves before others. They do not have much interaction with me. The two of them shouldn't meddle in other people's business, and they may not necessarily discover that Wuhan is my son. However, the Golden Dragon King is a very close friend of mine, so there's a very good chance that he'll save me. The North Sea Dragon King and I have a good relationship. Maybe he will help me. If Wuhan was saved by them, then I wouldn't be too worried. The one I'm most worried about is that Old Ruffian Dragon. It's true that a good dragon doesn't live long, and it's a scourge for 100,000 years. Ji Tianxing didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Wuhan fell into Old Ruffian's hands. But in the end, he was still relieved. Wuhan falling into the Dragon Realm was better than falling into the hands of the Divine King. After thinking for a long time, he let out a sigh. When I was in the God Realm, there was no Divine King or Dragon King who could interfere with the lightning tribulation and the heavenly Tao. Now that 1,000 years have passed, not only can the Divine King interfere with the lightning tribulation and the heavenly Tao to open the passage between the two worlds, even the Dragon King of the Dragon Realm can break open the passage between the two worlds and interfere with the affairs of the mortal world. The world has changed. Ji Tianxing already had a premonition that the God Realm and the Dragon Realm would change greatly, and they would no longer be the two worlds he was familiar with. Forget it, let's solve the matter in front of me first. After I recover my divine sovereign realm, I'll go to the Dragon Realm to find Wuhan. Then, he strode across the void and rushed back to the Five Elements world with a single step. On the way back, he had already planned out the next plan. At the same time, he also recalled the scene he saw in the dream when he was sleeping. A dream of 1,000,000 years, life and death, reincarnation, rise and fall, wither and glory are all in front of me. As long as one is under the heavenly Tao, even the most powerful Divine King can't escape the rules of the heavenly Tao, can't escape life, death, and reincarnation. Only by transcending reincarnation can one break through the shackles of the heavenly Tao, surpass all life, and be immortal. Years ago, as a peak Divine King, he had been fighting for this. He explored the realm above the Divine King, seeking to transcend reincarnation and surpass the power of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, he risked his life to explore the ancient ruins. After obtaining the heaven-punishing formation, he was besieged by various divine kings and died with hatred. But in this life, he seemed to have seen the light of dawn and had the hope of taking the last step. 3 sons, huh? Ha ha. Interesting. Ji Tianxing returned to the vicinity of the Five Elements world, stared at the dim light of the Five Elements world, and muttered meaningfully. After a while, he landed outside the heaven-punishing planet and came in front of Yun Yao. The golden ball of light with a radius of 90 feet was still wrapped around Yun Yao. She was still unconscious. Her divine body had already been reformed, and the injuries to her divine soul no longer existed. Moreover, she seemed to be absorbing some kind of energy. Not only did her strength recover to the level of a half-step heavenly god, it was also continuously strengthening. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's heart moved slightly, and a bold idea appeared in his mind. After goddess Yaoguang fell, her 7 souls turned into 7 divine pearls. Many years ago, Yao Yao refined 5 divine pearls. For so many years, I have searched the entire 5 elements world, and even all the major galaxies, but I still couldn't find the 6th and 7th pearls. But now, the divine light barrier protecting the 5 elements world has disappeared, and Yao Yao is resurrected here. Could it be that the divine light barrier was formed by the 6th divine pearl? Even Ji Tianqing himself was shocked by this bold guess. It's very possible. No wonder I couldn't find the 6th divine pearl even after searching the entire 5 elements world. So it was already in front of me, but I didn't notice it, and I didn't dare to imagine it. After confirming this answer, Ji Tianqing was sure that not only would Yun Yao be resurrected safely, but her strength would also skyrocket. He stopped worrying and hurriedly entered the 5 elements world. Then, he took out the small golden pagoda and returned to the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing appeared on the 5th level of the Divine Pagoda and entered the 6th level of the distorted spacetime through the Daluo Divine Formation. The distorted spacetime was empty and there was no one. Ji Tianqing placed his daughter Wushuang, disciple by Long, Qianyu, and Black Dragon in the distorted spacetime. The 2 divine beasts, Bai Long and Wushuang, were all unconscious, and it would take a long time for them to recover. However, Ji Tianqing released a life-saving divine light to treat their injuries one by one, so that they could wake up as soon as possible. After doing this, he began to meditate and cultivate, waiting patiently. He knew that Yun Yao would wake up soon. Jiku would also be reborn and return to the distorted spacetime. Although he still didn't know where Jiku was reborn, he had a strong feeling that it was definitely related to the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower, and it might even be inside the Divine Pagoda. Chapter 2759. Ji Tianqing's judgment was very accurate. He had cultivated in the distorted spacetime for more than 4 years, so it had only been about 50 months. His divine Tao foundation was very stable, and his skills had also improved. At this moment Jiku returned. 50 months had passed in the Divine Pagoda, but only 1 month had passed in the outside world. Including the 2 months she had been unconscious, she had been asleep for a total of 3 months. Not only had she returned unscathed, but she had also been reborn, becoming even more mysterious and unfathomable. She had a head of fiery red hair that reached her waist, a body of dark golden divine armor, and a dark golden trident. She was like a goddess of war that had descended from the 9 heavens. That beautiful face and unparalleled divine aura was like a divine phoenix. Without a doubt she, who had been reborn, had truly inherited the phoenix's legacy. In her previous life, she had only reached the strength of a top divine lord, and had not advanced any further. She could not break through to the divine king realm even if she spent her entire life. After all, this had nothing to do with one's cultivation effort, but talent. If one's talent and perception were not enough, even if they cultivated for 100,000 or 1,000,000 years, they would not reach the divine king realm. But it was different now. She, who had been reborn, had the true blood of the phoenix flowing in her body, and had mastered the divine bird's legacy. She already had the absolute qualifications to reach the divine king realm. When Ji Tianqing saw her, his eyes could not help but light up. The worry that had been hidden in his heart for a long time also dissipated. "That's great. Cuckoo, you've really been resurrected." Jiku was also stunned. She stared at Ji Tianqing, and her eyes immediately turned red and filled with tears. "Big brother Tianqing, you're really fine. I already knew that you were invincible. How could anything happen to you?" Jiku suppressed her grief and suppressed the tears in her eyes. Like a tired bird returning to its nest, she threw herself into Ji Tianqing's embrace. The two hugged each other tightly, and their emotions were quite emotional. After a while, Jiku calmed down and hurriedly asked, "Oh right, where's Elda's senior sister? And Wu Hen, Wu Shuang, Bai Long, are they still alive?" Ji Tianxing gently patted her back and said in a low voice, "They were all killed by the Divine King's clone, but Yao Yao is in the process of reviving. Moreover, it was a blessing in disguise for her. After fusing with the sixth divine orb, her power would soar to the limit. Wu Shuang, Bai Long, Qian Yu, and Hei Long were all revived by me using the heaven-mending orb. They are currently sleeping and recuperating. However, Lan Kuan self-destructed and Azurite died the earliest. I couldn't revive them." After hearing this, Jiku heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. However, she couldn't save Lan Kuan and Luli, which made her heart heavy and full of regret. "Big brother Tianxing, it's my fault. I killed them. Back then, you told us to stay in the Five Elements world. We should have listened to your orders and not gone to attack the heavenly star." Jiku's heart was filled with regret as she spoke with incomparable self-blame. She could no longer hold back the tears in her eyes. She wanted to tell Ji Tianxing everything that had happened. However, Ji Tianxing had used the time reversal divine ability and already knew what had happened. He gently shook his head and interrupted Jiku. He said in a heavy voice, "Cuckoo, you can't be blamed for this. You can't blame Yao Yao, Bai Long, and the others either. You were worried about my safety and went to help the heavenly star. I only regret that I couldn't hold back the Divine King's clone and let him go find you. We didn't do anything wrong. The one at fault is the heavenly star and the Divine King behind the heavenly star." Ji Tianxing raised his head and stared at the dark space. His eyes flashed with crazed killing intent. "Soon, we will head to the divine world. I will definitely find out who the Divine King behind the heavenly star is. When that time comes, I will make him pay 100 times, 1,000 times the price. Even if I kill the entire divine world and kill millions of people, I will not show mercy." Jiku couldn't speak as she sobbed. She could only nod furiously. This was because she was even angrier than Ji Tianxing. She blamed herself even more and wanted to kill that Divine King even more. After a long time, Ji Tianxing finally let go of Jiku. He held her face with both hands and said in a serious tone, "Cuckoo, you stay here and recover your divine Tao foundation. Also, take care of Wu Shuang, Bai Long, and the others. I need to leave for a while to do something." Jiku immediately understood what he meant. "Is it the heavenly star?" "Yes." Ji Tianxing nodded. Jiku hesitated for a moment and then asked, "After the successive disasters, the heavenly star's leaders and experts have all died. Now that the heavenly star is in chaos, there are only about 10 billion people left. I don't think they will be much of a threat." Ji Tianxing shook his head and said expressionlessly, "I understand what you mean, but I still have to go. The heavenly star and we cannot live under the same sky. They must pay the price. After I destroy the heavenly star, that Divine King will lose his claws in the mortal world and will not be able to continue his conspiracy. Also, this is only the first step of our revenge." Jiku did not try to dissuade him anymore and nodded in agreement. Ji Tianxing did not waste any time and immediately turned to leave. After leaving the Five Elements world, Ji Tianxing sped through the void and rushed to the heavenly star. 3 months ago, his black hole plan was about to be completed and the heavenly star was about to be destroyed. At the most crucial moment, the Divine King's clone descended into the mortal world and stopped everything. This time, no one could save the heavenly star. 10 days later, Ji Tianxing appeared on the heavenly star. If the Divine Emperor Palace still existed, even if only ruins and fences were left, he would also enter the Divine Emperor Palace and search for clues about the Divine King of the Upper Realm. But now, the Divine Emperor Palace was completely destroyed. Not even a speck of dust was left. He did not need to waste any more time. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing landed on a continent on the heavenly star and used the power of the world to enter the core of the world deep in the Earth's core. With a flash of light, he arrived at the purple light ball with a radius of 70,000 miles. The condensed purple light formed a huge barrier and blocked the endless crimson lava. In the middle of the light ball, there was a sacred purple mountain that was 10,000 feet tall. Hundreds of millions of colorful veins extended from its feet. This was Ji Tianqing's second time entering this place. He was not unfamiliar with it at all. Without any hesitation, he flew directly to the sacred purple mountain and manipulated the power of the world. After a while, the violent power of the world gushed out from the heavenly star. If one was in the void, they would be able to see that the southern hemisphere of the heavenly star spewed out another 100,000 purple flames. Each purple flame was hundreds of thousands of miles tall and erupted with the most terrifying power. A total of 100,000 purple flame-light pillars burst forth with unparalleled power and pushed the heavenly star to begin flying. Although the flying speed was very slow at first, after the heavenly star flew out for 20 million miles, its speed gradually increased. After a short 2 hours, the heavenly star's speed increased and flew out for 40 million miles. At this time, the heavenly star had already entered the gravitational circle of the black hole. With the attack of the terrifying gravitational force, the heavenly star's speed suddenly increased by several times. At the same time, the heavenly star trembled violently. Terrifying earthquakes erupted on the 2 remaining continents, and monstrous waves were also stirred up in the 3 seas. The real calamity had come. Chapter 2760. Swish. Ji Tianqing left planet Heaven Punisher and flew into the sky. He retreated 1,000,000 miles before stopping. Then, he stood quietly in the sky and admired the destruction of planet Heaven Punisher. He knew that planet Heaven Punisher and the billions of members of the Heaven Punisher were in chaos and war. The true gods of the Heaven Punisher had all died, and the remaining billions of people couldn't do anything. However, he couldn't let the Heaven Punisher live. He had to get rid of them. Who could guarantee that the Heaven Punisher wouldn't rise again in 100 or 1,000 years and sweep across the planet zones? Besides, he and his family had all been killed by the Divine King's clone. The Heaven Punisher had to bear the brunt of such a blood feud and pay the heaviest price. As planet Heaven Punisher kept accelerating, more and more areas entered the gravitational sphere. One day later, half of planet Heaven Punisher had entered the gravitational sphere. Then, an earth-shattering sound came from planet Heaven Punisher. Rumble! Ji Tianqing saw that half of planet Heaven Punisher was torn apart by the gravitational force and countless pieces splashed out. Those pieces seemed small, but they were actually thousands of miles of land and mountains. Not only that, endless seawater and lava flew out of planet Heaven Punisher and poured into the gravitational sphere. All the pieces, seawater and lava, were swallowed by the giant black hole. The mysterious black hole was the most terrifying thing in the world. Nobody knew what was hidden inside. Time passed. Planet Heaven Punisher kept collapsing and disintegrating at an extremely fast speed. In less than 2 days, the entire planet Heaven Punisher had disintegrated into billions of pieces and was swallowed by the black hole. A planet that carried countless lives and witnessed the glory of generations of civilizations was destroyed just like that. It was completely swallowed by the black hole. Not even a piece of it was left. A few more hours passed. The sky became calm again. There was no wind or sound at all, as if nothing had happened. Ji Tianqing's anger and murderous intent only subsided a little after he destroyed planet Heaven Punisher. He didn't stay any longer. He turned around and returned to the 5 Elements world. Along the way, he recalled the scene in his dream and couldn't help but murmur, whether it's 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years, there are only 3,000 worlds in the void, no more, no less. Now that I have destroyed planet Heaven Trader, one of the 3,000 worlds is missing. Somewhere in the void, there should be a star that receives the protection of the heavenly axiom and produces life, evolving into a new world, right? When he thought about it this way, he became even more interested and curious about the illusory and supreme heavenly Tao. 10 days later, Ji Tianxing returned to the Five Elements world. He searched in the void, wanting to see the sleeping Yun Yao. But the golden light disappeared, and Yun Yao was nowhere to be found. He was overjoyed and thought to himself, could it be that Yao Yao has awakened and returned to the divine pagoda? Hence, he quickly returned to the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower and entered the distorted spacetime. He didn't see Yun Yao, so he quickly went to find Jiku to ask about the situation. When the two of them met, Jiku greeted him and said eagerly, "Big brother Tianxing, big senior sister has been sleeping in the void. I was afraid that it was not safe, so I brought her back to the divine pagoda." Ji Tianxing came to a sudden realization and asked, "Then has she awakened?" Jiku shook his head and said, "Not yet. She's still sleeping, but her strength is increasing very quickly, that's good." Ji Tianxing was relieved. "I'll go and see her." Under Jiku's lead, he flew to the depths of the distorted spacetime and saw the cocoon-like golden light ball. Yun Yao, who was as beautiful as a fairy, was still sleeping in the light ball. Her divine power and divine soul aura were very stable and very powerful. Ji Tianxing knew at a glance that her strength had already surpassed the half-step celestial god realm, and it was still increasing. Now she was about 40 times stronger than a peak true god. When she was 99 times stronger than a peak true god, she would reach the limit of the mortal realm and awaken. Ji Tianxing then asked Jiku, "How are Wushuang, Bailong, Qianyu, and Heilong?" Jiku answered honestly, "They are still sleeping. Their injuries and strength are recovering. They will probably recover in a few more decades." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "Then we'll wait for them to awaken before we plan to ascend. Before that, I still have many things to do." Jiku thought for a moment and asked, "Are we going to planet Chaotic Heaven to kill the remnants of the heaven-punishing race?" Ji Tianxing said calmly, "This is just a side trip. I still have to refine some stars and increase my strength to the limit." Jiku said eagerly, "I'll go with you." Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded, "Stay in the divine tower for now. I'll call for you when we need to fight." "Okay." Jiku agreed without hesitation. She had been suppressing her hatred and killing intent. She wanted to find the remnants of the heaven-punishing race and kill them to vent her anger. 1 day later, Ji Tianxing controlled the power of the world and pushed the Five Elements world to fly toward planet Chaotic Heaven. 1 month later, the Five Elements world arrived near planet Chaotic Heaven and stopped in the void. Ji Tianxing and Jiku went to planet Chaotic Heaven to kill the remnants of the heaven-punishing race. His Tianxing battleship had been given to Bailong to pilot. Tianxing battleship had been destroyed during the battle with the Divine King's clone. Now Ji Tianxing and Jiku could only rely on themselves to travel through the void. It was really inconvenient. Fortunately, the Earth spirit race in the Sword World had started to build a new battleship under the leadership of the Golden Mountain King. With his previous experience, the Golden Mountain King would definitely build an even more powerful divine battleship. 3 days later, Ji Tianxing and Jiku arrived at planet Chaotic Heaven. This planet, which used to be the main planet, was now in chaos and looked rather desolate. The 200,000 heaven-punishing soldiers and 1 million heaven-punishing craftsmen were determined to build this planet into a new home. More than 10 billion foreign race martial artists and civilians had fallen into the hands of the heaven-punishing race and become their slave. However, when planet Chaotic Heaven encountered a calamity, more than 100,000 heaven-punishing soldiers fled here. They brought news that planet Chaotic Heaven was facing a calamity and was about to be destroyed. This caused planet Chaotic Heaven, which was originally stable, to fall into chaos. The foreign race experts who were enslaved by the heaven-punishing race all fought back violently, and the situation became more and more intense. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku entered planet Chaotic Heaven, and did not waste any time. They immediately started a massacre. Wherever the heaven-punishing race had the most people, they destroyed that place. It did not matter if you were a heaven-punishing soldier, a heaven-punishing craftsman, or a heaven-punishing puppet. As long as you worked for the heaven-punishing race, you would definitely die. The massacre lasted for half a month. Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku were invincible. They killed until the sky darkened. Heads rolled and blood flowed. Half a month later, the two of them killed more than 800,000 heaven-punishing race members before leaving planet Chaotic Heaven. The rest were all defeated soldiers scattered all over the world. They were all small factions. The two of them did not have the time to kill them one by one. The foreign race experts would naturally do it for them. It was only a matter of time. Chapter 2761. After leaving the celestial globe, Ji Tianqing did not go to other worlds to slaughter the remnants of the Heaven Punishers. Although there were tens of millions of Heaven Punishers scattered in the thousands of worlds of the various star field. But if the Heaven Punishers were destroyed, those Heaven Punishers would be like rootless duckweed. In less than a few decades they would be killed by the powerhouses of the various world. Ji Tianqing controlled the 5 elements world and headed directly to the nearest galaxy. He only had one goal: choose the most suitable star and continue to refine, and refine again. 3 months later, the 5 elements world arrived near a galaxy. This galaxy was the only and most dazzling star core in the celestial globe. The star core that was hundreds of billions of miles long hung in the void, blooming with a brilliant light that would never be extinguished. Among them, there were tens of thousands of stars of various sizes. Basically, they were all barren stars without life. Of course, barren did not mean barren and useless. There were a few planets that seemed to be barren, but they actually contained enormous mineral resources. For example, divine stone veins, metal veins. There were also heaven and earth divine flames, as well as all kinds of wind, fire, and thunder power. Thus, Ji Tianqing chose among the stars. 2 months later, he successfully refined a metal star with a diameter of 30 million miles. 4 months later, he refined a second star with rich resources, which had a diameter of more than 40 million miles. Half a year later, he refined a third star. As time passed, Ji Tianqing continued to refine one star after another. The 5 elements world was still expanding. Its diameter slowly increased from 900 million miles to a diameter of 1 billion miles. Moreover, the 5 elements world had obtained a huge amount of resources, and its strength was rapidly increasing. As a result, Ji Tianqing's strength also rose along with it. Starting from the peak true immortal realm, it was doubled, tripled, quadrupled. 2 years later, in the 5 elements world, in the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower, Yun Yao was the first to wake up. The golden divine light that enveloped her had been completely absorbed by her. The truth was just as Ji Tianqing had expected. The divine light barrier that protected the 5 elements world was formed by the 6th divine pearl. When Yun Yao learned of this in her deep sleep, she was also very shocked and in disbelief. This time, after experiencing death and rebirth, she had also undergone a complete transformation. Even though his appearance hadn't changed, his aura had become even more sacred, as if he was a peerless divine king from the 9 heavens. Her strength had also reached the pinnacle of the mortal world, 99 times that of a peak true god. Furthermore, after fusing with the 6th divine orb, she obtained a brand new power. Light divine power. That's right, the 6th divine pearl represented light. As a result, Yun Yao grasped 6 special divine powers and condensed 6 types of laws. The laws of blue sea, the laws of stars, the laws of longevity, the laws of earth, the laws of wind and fire, and the laws of light. Once she ascended to the divine world, she would be able to break through to the 5th level of the heavenly God realm. Moreover, she could even condense a powerful divine core with the 6 types of laws as the foundation. In addition, Yun Yao had already obtained 6 of Goddess Yaoguang's 7 spirits. In the dream, not only had she experienced millions of years, she had seen life, death, and reincarnation. She had also obtained most of Goddess Yaoguang's memories. This was the main reason for the change in her temperament. Without a doubt, the current her was very similar to Goddess Yaoguang from the ancient era. The two's appearance and temperament were 80% similar. Whether in the mortal world or the divine world, she was a top-notch goddess who could make billions of gods infatuated. When Yun Yao woke up, her first reaction wasn't joy or excitement. Instead, she was in extreme pain and tears flowed down her face. The first people she thought of were Ji Tianxing, Ji Wuhan, and Ji Wushuang. Then, it was Ji Ku, Bai Long, and the 4 divine beasts. In her memories, everyone had met with misfortune and been killed by the divine king's clone. Even if she survived and benefited from the disaster, it was still extremely painful and disheartening. Fortunately, Jiku had been by her side the whole time. The moment she woke up, Jiku held her hand and gently comforted her. After Yun Yao calmed down, Jiku explained what had happened to her. Hearing that everyone had been resurrected, Yun Yao felt slightly better. However, the glazed fire dragon and Lan Kuan were dead, and Ji Wuhan was also taken away by the Almighty of the Dragon Realm. She was still filled with grief and worry. Ji Ku comforted her again. Brother Tianxing has already done his best, but Glazed and Lan Kuan really can't be saved. This is fate. Perhaps one day in the future we will surpass reincarnation and surpass the heavenly Tao, and we might be able to bring Glazed and Lan Kuan back. As for Wuhan, he was saved by the Almighty of the Dragon Realm. It's better than falling into the hands of that divine king. After Ji Ku's persuasion, Yun Yao felt much better and her emotions slowly calmed down. Then, she asked Ji Ku to take her to visit Ji Wushuang, Bai Long, and the others. For a full 15 years, the 5 elements world had been swimming freely in the galaxy. Planets full of resources were swallowed by the 5 elements world one after another. It wasn't until the 16th year that the 5 elements world finally stopped expanding. Although the diameter of this planet still didn't exceed 1 billion kilometers, it had reached 990 million kilometers. And Ji Tianxing's strength had also reached 99 times that of a peak true god. He had already reached the limit of the mortal world. The two numbers were inexplicably similar. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Then, the 5 elements world stopped in the galaxy. Ji Tianxing returned to his peak strength and returned to the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda. At this time, more than 700 years had passed in the distorted spacetime. Ji Ku and Yun Yao waited patiently. They had been consolidating their divine Tao foundation and cultivating various divine abilities and consummate skills. In more than 700 years, the two of them had cultivated dozens of divine abilities. Ji Wushuang, Bai Long, Qian Yu, and Black Dragon had already recovered more than 600 years ago. They had been cultivating in seclusion for over 600 years, and only ended their seclusion when Ji Tianxing returned. After such a long period of seclusion, they naturally gained a lot. The two of them and the 2 divine beasts had all reached half-step celestial god realm and mastered dozens of divine abilities and secret skills. Everything was ready to go. After Ji Tianxing reunited with everyone, he prepared the ascension plan. However, there were still a few problems to solve before ascension. If everyone ascended, what about the 5 elements world? Continue to stay in the mortal world? Of course, Ji Tianxing wasn't willing. He had already merged with the 5 elements world. With the 5 elements world, he was immortal. He also had endless source stones and could use the power of the world. He really wanted to take the 5 elements world away. However, it was obviously unrealistic to take a planet with him. Since ancient times, such a ridiculous thing had never happened in tens of thousands of years of history. The second problem. Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, and White Dragon naturally had to ascend to the divine world. However, Black Dragon would definitely ascend to the dragon realm. Qian Yu might also enter the dragon realm. In this case, everyone would be separated once they ascended. Moreover, they wouldn't be able to reunite for the next few hundred years or even thousands of years. Chapter 2762. In the twisted space, Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, Qian Yu, and Black Dragon were all there. Everyone was discussing countermeasures. Ji Tianqing expressed his thoughts to everyone. First, I don't want to abandon the five elements world. It's very, very important. I have a feeling that once I uncover some ancient mysteries in the future, it will be as important as the God realm and the dragon realm. Second, after activating the laws of heaven and earth, the heavenly Tao's power will lead us to ascend. The five of us will go to the God realm, but Qian Yu and Black Dragon will most likely enter the dragon realm. Moreover, the God realm and the dragon realm have many ascension pools. Even if the five of us ascend to the God realm, we will land in different ascension pools. The God realm is very big, hundreds or even thousands of times bigger than the five elements world. Those ascension pools are scattered in every corner of the God realm. Once we are separated, it will be difficult for us to meet for hundreds or even thousands of years. Therefore, we can't be separated. We must ascend to the God realm or the dragon realm together. Hearing his words, everyone looked troubled and began to discuss among themselves. White Dragon smiled bitterly. Master, although you are the most powerful person in history and can always create miracles, Ascension Pool has never been used before. However, something like ascending with a ball had never happened before, and it was impossible to accomplish. If you do it, where will the heavenly Tao's face go? Ji Ku nodded. Although the five elements world is definitely extraordinary and might be one of the main worlds in the past, but ascending with the five elements world is too absurd and bizarre. Ji Wushuang, who was 5 feet tall and looked like she was 10 years old, was as innocent and cute as ever. She looked up at Ji Tianqing, blinked her big eyes, and said, "Father, it's very simple if you don't want us to be separated. We will all stay in the five elements world. You can bring the five elements world alone and ascend to the God realm." The little girl's thoughts were more innocent. Yun Yao stroked her head, smiled, and shook her head. Shuang what you said is not a bad idea. But the problem is that your father can't bring the five elements world with him. Unless. Everyone agreed with Yun Yao's words and nodded. However, Yun Yao paused. She suddenly thought of something, and her eyes lit up. Right, we've been neglecting a problem. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and the others all looked at her expectantly. What is it? Mistress, could it be that Master has hopes of ascending with the five elements world? Yun Yao smiled and nodded. That's right. Although the chances are slim, we can still give it a try. Ji Ku was full of doubts and could not help but ask, "Eldest senior sister, what's going on?" Yun Yao explained to everyone, many years ago, when Tianqing controlled the five elements world and flew in the void, I thought of a problem. He had already fused with the five elemental world. If he could shrink the five elemental world and store it in his body, wouldn't he be able to take it away as he wished? However, at that time, the five elements world was protected by the divine light barrier, so he couldn't shrink it. I've tried thousands of times, but I couldn't break through the divine light barrier. Now it's different. The divine light barrier has become the sixth divine pearl, which I devoured and refined. If the five elements world loses its seal, perhaps Tianqing has hope. After hearing Yun Yao's words, everyone's eyes lit up, revealing looks of anticipation as they looked at Ji Tianqing one after another. Ji Tianqing's heart also stirred, and he hurriedly nodded and said, "It makes sense. You all wait here, I'll go and give it a try." Finished talking, he left the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda and flew into the void outside the 5 elements world. He stood in the void, looking at the 5 elements world in front of him, and began to circulate his energy to control the world power. Swoosh! Before long, the 5 elements world burst forth with resplendent golden light, releasing a vast amount of world power. The entire 5 elements world was dim and lightless before, but now it became dazzling and dazzling. Ji Tianxing controlled the world power and kept compressing the 5 elements world, wanting to shrink it. This move was indeed effective. As he kept circulating his energy, the golden world power surged and erupted, shrinking the 5 elements world very quickly. It was still 990 million miles in diameter earlier. In less than 15 minutes, it became 980 million miles. Along with the passage of time, the 5 elements world slowly shrunk. However, 4 hours later, when the 5 elements world shrunk to 940 million miles, the 5 continents and the endless sky sea all produced tremendous turbulence. The various continents' plates were compressed, and earthquakes started occurring. Countless ravines and cracks appeared. The endless sky sea surged and surged, stirring up monstrous waves. If Ji Tianxing continued to shrink the 5 elements world, it was bound to cause an even stronger shock. At that time, the living beings of the 5 continents and the endless sky sea would suffer large-scale casualties. With no other choice, Ji Tianxing could only stop casting the spell. At this time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the rest came to the void one after another. Everyone discovered the 5 elements world's turbulence and specially rushed over to inform him. When they got close, the moment they saw Ji Tianxing's expression, everyone understood that he already knew. This method won't work. Forcefully shrinking the 5 elements world will destroy this world. Ji Tianxing shook his head, his expression somewhat solemn. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the rest also frowned and thought of other method. Everyone was silent, their hearts somewhat heavy. If they could not bring the 5 elements world away, their ascension plan would be obstructed. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind as he thought of a certain possibility. Got it! Everyone stopped thinking and turned to look at him. Tianxing, have you thought of another way? Yun Yao asked. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a solemn expression, If I directly shrink the 5 elements world like this, I will definitely destroy this world. If I have a divine artifact with a space of 1 billion miles, I can store the entire 5 elements world. Moreover, this divine artifact will change its size according to my wishes. In fact, it can always be hidden in my body. In this way, won't I be able to bring the 5 elements world with me and ascend? Hearing this, everyone's eyes brightened, and they revealed hopeful looks. But soon, the light in everyone's eyes dimmed again. Ji Ku smiled bitterly and said, Brother Tianxing, your idea is very good and indeed feasible. But how can we have such a powerful divine artifact that can store the entire 5 elements world? Everyone nodded. Among the divine artifacts that they currently had, the highest grade was a heavenly divine artifact forged from source stone. It was impossible for a divine artifact of this grade to store the 5 elements world. Ji Tianxing revealed a confident smile and said, Cuckoo, have you forgotten? Back then, I plucked 18 stars and refined them into the heavenly star chain. As long as you have the strength of a divine king or a king-grade divine artifact, you can store a star. Coincidentally, I happen to have a king-grade divine artifact here. As he spoke, he took out the heaven-mending pearl in his mind. Swoosh! The thumb-sized heaven-mending pearl floated in the void, emitting a dense white light. Everyone's spirits were lifted, revealing expressions of excitement and anticipation. Chapter 2763. Among the people present, only Yun Yao and Ji Ku knew that Ji Tianxing had the heaven-mending pearl. Of course, Qian Yu and Black Dragon also counted. Everyone knew that the heaven-mending pearl was an ancient divine artifact with the heaven-defying effect of a divine artifact. but no one could guarantee that such a thumb-sized divine pearl could hold a five-element world with a diameter of more than 900 million miles. The gap between the two was more than billions of times. Therefore, when Ji Tianqing activated his technique, everyone held their breaths and stared at it with their hearts in their throat. Swoosh! Under his control, the thumb-sized heaven-mending pearl flew towards the five-element world. During the flight, the heaven-mending pearl expanded at an extremely exaggerated speed. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, the thumb-sized heaven-mending pearl expanded to a radius of 10,000 feet. Swoosh! With another flash of white light, the heaven-mending pearl expanded to a radius of 20 miles. Swoosh! With another flash of white light, the heaven-mending pearl expanded to a radius of 2,000 miles. As the heaven-mending pearl flew through the void, it would flash once every moment and expand by dozens or hundreds of times. Everyone stood quietly in the void, their eyes never leaving the heaven-mending pearl. Even though the heaven-mending pearl was getting further and further away from everyone, its size was expanding rapidly, and it seemed to be getting closer and closer to everyone. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Soon a day passed. The heaven-mending pearl had expanded to a radius of 100 million miles, floating above the five-element world. Even though it was already so big that it covered the sky. But compared to the five-element world, it was still too small, only 1/10. Ji Tianqing still did not stop circulating his technique. He continued to use his mind to control the heaven-mending pearl, expanding it infinitely. 2 days later, the heaven-mending pearl expanded to a radius of 200 million miles. Ji Tianqing was already struggling to control the heaven-mending pearl, and his mind was also quite tired. But he had no intention of stopping to rest and continued to expand the heaven-mending pearl. 5 days later, the heaven-mending pearl finally expanded to a radius of 500 million miles. It was enough to hold half of the five-element world. However, the potential of the heaven-mending pearl had been exhausted, and Ji Tianqing's mind was also extremely tired. There was nothing he could do. The heaven-mending pearl's power had not recovered to 10%. Even though it was a king-grade artifact, it had reached its limit. At this time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Ji Tianqing, Ji Wushuang, Bai Long, and the others all saw through Ji Tianqing's situation. Seeing his weak state of mind and pale complexion, everyone's hearts clenched, feeling extremely worried. Tianqing, we're here to help you. Yun Yao decisively channeled her energy. Her palms released dazzling divine light and infused it into Ji Tianqing's body, helping him replenish his divine power and maintain his mind. Let's go too. Ji Ku, Ji Wushuang, and Bai Long also moved to help. Even Qian Yu and Black Dragon used their divine power and divine soul power to help Ji Tianqing. Instantly, Ji Tianqing's divine power surged, and his mind regained its clarity. Under his control, the heaven-mending orb continued to expand. Another 3 days passed. The heaven-mending orb finally expanded to a radius of 800 million miles. It could already contain 80% of the five elements world. However, the heaven-mending orb stopped expanding again. Everyone's power had reached its peak. We're not strong enough. What should we do? Just a little bit more and we would have succeeded. Take a divine pill or use a forbidden secret technique to forcefully increase our power. No. Increasing our power by a few times in a short period of time will cause serious side effects. Then what should we do? Everyone was anxious, but there was nothing they could do. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he said, "Don't worry, everyone. I have an idea." As he spoke, he quickly absorbed the power of the five elements world. Swoosh! Within the five elements world, thousands of divine and golden rays flew out and entered his body. His divine power and mind surged again, and his mind became 100 times more energetic. Forcefully absorbing a large amount of world power caused his body to swell and become several times thicker. No matter how tough his meridians and divine body were, They could not withstand such violent world power and began to tear and strain. However, Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and continued to control the heaven-mending orb to expand. 820 million miles, 850 million miles, 890 million miles. After half a day, the heaven-mending orb finally expanded to a radius of 1 billion miles. At this time, the heaven-mending orb was as big as the Five Elements world. No, it was a little bigger than the Five Elements world. It was like a sacred, white, and flawless star floating above the Five Elements world. We finally succeeded. It's not easy. We can finally leave with the Five Elements world. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others felt their blood boil when they saw this scene. They revealed expressions of joy and excitement. Ji Tianqing controlled the heaven-mending orb and split it into two halves from the middle. Like two super huge bowls, they slowly covered the Five Elements world. As the two super huge bowls slowly closed, the Five Elements world was gradually swallowed and absorbed into the heaven-mending orb. After a full 3 days, Ji Tianqing finally completed this unprecedented and earth-shattering feat. After the two super huge bowls closed, it just happened to contain the Five Elements world. And inside the Five Elements world, there were no changes. However, this could not be considered a success. Ji Tianqing forced his tired body and continued to cast spells, controlling the heaven-mending orb to slowly shrink. Swoosh! As time passed, the heaven-mending orb shrank at an extremely fast speed. 1 billion miles, 900 million miles, 800 million miles. While the heaven-mending orb was shrinking, Ji Tianqing had been paying attention to the situation of the Five Elements world. Everything before was his idea, and it seemed feasible. However, the most important problem was that if the heaven-mending orb shrank, the Five Elements world would also be compressed and become smaller, and then all his efforts would be in vain. The heaven-mending orb shrank to the size of a thumb. If the Five Elements world was also shrunk to that size, the entire world would be completely destroyed. Not a single life would be left. In that case, what was the point of taking away the Five Elements world? Fortunately, the worst result that Ji Tianqing expected did not happen. The surface of the heaven-mending orb shrank, but the internal space was still as big as before, with a radius of 1 billion miles. This divine orb was indeed miraculous and heaven-defying. Just like a spatial ring, the surface was just a ring, but the inside could hold a mountain. And the heaven-mending orb was a king-grade divine artifact. Once it recovered to its peak, not to mention holding the Five Elements world, even if it held 10 more, it would not be a problem. Ji Tianqing was completely relieved. After a full 2 days, the heaven-mending orb returned to its original appearance, returning to the size of a thumb. The void regained its calm, and the Five Elements world disappeared. Swoosh! The heaven-mending orb flew back in front of Ji Tianqing and landed in his hand. He pinched the heaven-mending orb between his index and middle fingers and carefully sized it up. He saw a strange and magnificent scene. The heaven-mending orb, which was as clear as white jade, contained the Five Elements world that had shrunk hundreds of millions of times. It still looked clear and exquisite. Moreover, the Five Elements world did not suffer any adverse effect. The martial artists and the common people in the world did not even know what had happened. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others were both shocked and curious. This is unbelievable! This is simply a method that only a divine king has. Our wish has finally been fulfilled. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded and said, "Everyone enter the Five Elements world and recuperate in peace. Next, I will prepare to ascend." Chapter 2764. The Five Elements world was successfully stored in the heaven-mending pearl. Ji Tianqing's ascension plan was already halfway to success. Yun Yao, Jiku, and the others were no longer worried and entered the heaven-mending pearl one after another. What surprised them was that the heaven-mending pearl was only the size of a thumb from the outside. Once they entered the heaven-mending pearl, It was a vast world with a radius of 1 billion miles and the entire five elements world. They were filled with shock and amazement as they entered the five elements world and returned to the God Pagoda to rest. Before they rested, everyone gathered together. Yun Yao said to everyone, "Everyone, the next time we leave the God Pagoda, we should have already ascended to the God realm. At that time, everyone will be baptized by the heavenly Tao in the ascension pool. That is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so you have to grasp it well." Everyone nodded in agreement. The innocent and naive Ji Wushuang raised his head to look at his mother Yun Yao and asked, "Mother, what is the ascension pool? Is it like taking a bath when we are baptized in the pool?" Yun Yao smiled and reached out to stroke Ji Wushuang's little head. Bai Long and Ji Ku had ascended once, so they naturally knew what the ascension pool was. However, Qian Yu and Black Dragon had never experienced it before, so they looked forward to it, but they were also worried and confused. Seeing this, Yun Yao looked at Ji Ku and said, "Ku, you and Bai Long have stayed in the God realm for a few hundred years, so you are very familiar with the God realm. However, Shuang Qian Yu, and Black Dragon have never been there before, so they know nothing about the God realm. Since we have nothing to do, why don't you tell them about the God realm?" Ji Ku naturally nodded in agreement and smiled. "Shuang don't worry. The ascension pool is a pool formed by the heavenly Tao, so there is no danger. It is said that there are thousands of ascension pools in the Dragon realm and thousands in the God realm. Those ascension pools appear randomly in different regions and change their positions every 100 years. Therefore, no one knows which ascension pool we will appear in. If we are lucky, the ascension pool will be on a few continents, not far from the cities and god nations. If we are unlucky and the ascension pool appears in a dangerous place, then we will be unlucky." Qian Yu and Black Dragon nodded as they listened, praying in their hearts. However, Ji Wushuang wasn't too concerned about this issue. She tugged on Ji Ku's sleeve and asked worriedly, "Second mother, what exactly is in the ascension pool?" Ji Ku gently caressed her small face and explained, "The ascension pool is filled with divine lightning liquid and 8 other types of God power. It's like a vast and misty ocean. To ordinary true gods, tempering their bodies in the ascension pool was like being reborn. It would be painful and torturous, but to us it's not torture, it's enjoyment." Hearing this, Ji Wushuang's furrowed brows relaxed, revealing a sweet smile. "And, as long as it doesn't hurt. Shuang is most afraid of pain." Qian Yu hurriedly asked, "Sister Ku, if we go through the baptism of the ascension pool, will we be able to break through to the heavenly God realm?" Ji Ku nodded and said, "After going through the tempering of the ascension pool, they will obtain great benefits. Ordinary people would basically increase their cultivation by 1 level. Geniuses would normally increase their cultivation realm by 2 levels, or break through a major bottleneck. We're all half-step celestial deities. After going through the ascension pool's baptism, we'll definitely break through to the heavenly God realm. Not just that, Shuang Qian Yu and the Black Dragon should be able to reach 3rd-level celestial deity realm. I should be able to reach 4th-level celestial deity realm. Eldest senior sister and big brother Tianxing might reach 5th-level celestial deity realm. Once you break through to the heavenly God realm, don't be in a hurry to leave the ascension pool. Stay in the ascension pool first and take the opportunity to condense divine Tao laws and form a divine spark." "Divine spark?" Ji Wushuang blinked her big eyes and said full of curiosity, "Is it divine Tao laws condensing together like a little baby, stored in our stomach? If that's the case, wouldn't it be like mother carrying me and big brother?" Without waiting for her to speak, everyone could not refrain from laughing. Coco hurriedly shook her head and explained, "Shuang first half is right. It's indeed condensing the divine Tao laws that we grasp together. But the divine spark isn't a little baby. It's like a piece of gem. It will exist in the depths of our sea of consciousness. That is our divine soul and the source of power, even more important than our lives." Ji Wushuang, Qianyu, and the Black Dragon all nodded their heads to express that they understood. Qianyu hesitated for a bit and could not resist asking. Previously, old Ji said that the divine realm is vast like smoke, several hundred times larger than the five elements world. Then just what is the divine realm like? Are there continents, oceans, city-states, kingdoms too? Are the life forms in the divine realm all deities above true God realm? This time, not waiting for Ji Ku to explain, the white dragon beat him to it and answered, "Little fox, master didn't say anything at all, nor is he exaggerating. The divine realm is indeed 1,000 times larger than the five elements world. That is a main world that exists eternally after all. The divine realm has a total of 4 continents, 9 great sea regions, 36 deity realms, and 108 grotto heavens. That place is truly a place where myriad races stand in great numbers, myriad countries contend for supremacy, heavens chosen as plentiful as clouds, heroes rising together. Disregarding other things, just those 4 continents are divided into 100 divine regions. Each divine region has 100 divine kingdoms. In the 9 great sea regions, there are also countless divine kingdoms and forces that have built all kinds of strange city-states and tribes. As for the 36 deity realms and 108 grotto heavens, they are all super forces of the divine realm. Ordinary divine monarchs cannot afford to offend them. Only our master, who had reached the peak of the divine monarch realm back then, dared to sweep through the 36 deity realms and 108 grotto heavens before breaking through to the divine king realm. All the young geniuses of that generation were all crushed by our master once. When the white dragon spoke of these past events, his face and eyes were full of memories and pride. The black dragon also felt his blood boil, very much looking forward to it. Only Qian Yu's body trembled, and he said somewhat worriedly, "In that case, didn't old Ji offend all the super forces? Then when we go to the divine realm, won't we be like foxes with our tails between our legs?" The white dragon immediately laughed disdainfully and said, "Ha ha! We are not worried, what are you afraid of? Anyway, our master has changed his identity now. At most, he will crush them again." Qian Yu thought deeply and nodded repeatedly, "And that's a good idea." Ji Wushuang tugged at the white dragon's sleeves and asked, "Eldest senior brother, do all the people in the divine realm have strength above true God?" The white dragon hurriedly shook his head and explained, "That's not it. Even though the divine realm is vast, with boundless resources, myriad races standing in great numbers, extremely prosperous, most of the people in the divine realm are ordinary. However, 80% of the living beings were ordinary people, which meant that their strength was below the true God realm. In the divine realm, regardless of whether it is martial sage or void god, they can only be considered ordinary people. The most common deities are true gods. 5th level celestial deity and above are expert. Reaching divine lord realm is a powerhouse. 5th level divine lord realm and above, that is the city lord or monarch that rules over myriad deities. As for divine king powerhouses, each region only has around 10 or so. Only then did Qian Yu and the black dragon reveal looks akin to being relieved of a heavy burden, both heaving a sigh in relief. "That's good. I thought that we would become the weaklings at the bottom after ascending to the divine realm. Looks like we can become experts not long after ascending to the divine realm." Chapter 2765. In the Void. Ji Tianxing had already put the heaven-mending pearl back into his body. At this moment, the heaven-mending pearl had shrunk to the size of a mung bean and was floating in his sea of consciousness. Even the sword of burial of heaven had been put back into his body. He stood proudly in the void and stared at the galaxy in front of him. He said to himself with emotion, "After 1100 years, I'm going back to the God realm again. There's no longer anyone or anything in this mortal world that I'm reluctant to part with." Indeed, the people that he was reluctant to part with were all in the 5 elements world, and he carried them with him. Going to the God realm, It's time to resolve the grudge from 1,000 years ago. When the time comes, I'm afraid that I won't have time to conserve my energy or plan slowly. It'll be a bloody battle. But I'm not afraid. Even if I have to kill everyone in the God realm, I'll turn those 5 bastards into ashes. Even though it had been more than 1,000 years, the hatred that was engraved in his heart had not dissipated. Instead, it had become even clearer. Ji Tianqing calmed his emotions and dispelled all distracting thoughts. He began to release the laws of heaven and earth. He slowly raised his palms and released his strongest divine power, releasing the laws of the 5 elements. Swoosh! He pushed his palms forward, and a colorful divine light surged out from his palms. Suddenly, the colorful divine light condensed into a halo of light that covered 100 miles and enveloped Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing channeled his energy again and released the laws of stars. Swoosh! Endless gold and silver divine light surged out from his palms and formed a halo around him. Suddenly, the halo around him became even more brilliant, like a dazzling star. Next, Ji Tianqing released the laws of space. The surging white divine light formed a halo of light that covered 100 miles around him. As he waved his palms for the 4th time, the last law of earth also surged out. Swoosh! The dark yellow divine light condensed into a halo of light that covered 100 miles around him. Up until now, Ji Tianqing had only mastered these 4 laws. Among them, the laws of 5 elements and stars were laws that true gods could master. But the laws of earth and space were laws that only heavenly gods could master. In fact, when Ji Tianqing was asleep, he saw the passage of millions of years in his dream. He gained enlightenment and vaguely touched upon the laws of life, death, and reincarnation. Of course, he didn't even comprehend a trace of Upanishad. He only vaguely understood some principles. However, that was a power and domain that only godly king experts could reach. With his current strength, he was simply too weak. After Ji Tianqing struck out with 4 different kinds of divine Tao laws, he madly circulated his god force, pushing his god force and potential to the limit. He spared no effort to maintain the operation of the 4 divine Tao laws at all costs. Instantly, his star, which was hundreds of miles wide, became even more dazzling. That incomparably bright divine light soared into the sky. Time passed quietly. Every breath was torture for Ji Tianqing. However, he held on with all his might. As long as he could hold on for 100 breaths of time, he would succeed. When breaking through to the heavenly god stage, the more heavenly Tao laws one grasps, the more powerful the Godhead one condenses, and the smoother one's future cultivation of the divine way will be. Unfortunately, I only grasped 4 kinds of divine Tao laws, exactly the same as back then. However, I have the experience of ascension once and made preparations in advance. The other few kinds of powers in the ascension pool, I've also grasped them to the limit and are on the verge of forming laws. After I enter the ascension pool, I can still master a few more kinds of divine Tao laws. Ji Tianqing supported the operation of divine Tao laws and evoked the resonance of heavenly Tao power as he calculated in his heart. Unknowingly, 100 breaths of time passed. Normally, this bit of time was very short. But now, it became very long and torturous, virtually exhausting Ji Tianqing's divine power and mental strength. Fortunately, he successfully held on. Rumble! In the boundlessly high void, heaven-shocking divine thunder suddenly sounded out. In the darkness, 5-colored divine light appeared out of thin air, carrying endless lightning, pouring down like a monstrous flood. Swoosh! In a blink of an eye, that boundless divine light and lightning drowned a radius of 1,000 miles. Ji Tianqing and his 4 kinds of divine Tao laws were all enveloped by endless divine light and lightning. This was the power of heavenly Tao, the will of heavenly Tao that brought him out of the mortal world and ascended to the divine world. It was not easy for ordinary gods to want to ascend. Even a genius with exceptional aptitude had to make decades of preparation and try dozens or hundreds of times before they could trigger the power of heavenly Tao. Just like Yun Shuiyan back then, deciding to take Dubhe and escape from planet Heaven Crusher. She also needed decades of preparation before she could take Dubhe and ascend to the upper realm. And now Ji Tianqing succeeded in one try. Endless five-colored divine light and lightning transformed into a vortex with a radius of 1,000 miles, spinning rapidly. In a short 10 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing and the 4 circles of light around him were swallowed without a trace. After a long time, the dazzling divine light and lightning dissipated. When the void calmed down, there was nothing left. Ji Tianqing had long disappeared. He had already left the mortal world and ascended to the divine world. Even though Ji Tianqing had ascended once back then. But that time, he had borrowed the power of the space-time roulette and arrived at the dragon realm in a daze. This time was different. Ji Tianqing experienced the entire ascension process very clearly and calmly. First, there was a dazzling scene in front of him. The divine light and lightning were dazzling. Then, his vision turned black and his heart suddenly jumped, because the sacred and vast power of heavenly Tao wrapped around him and tore through the void, flying toward the endless sky. That feeling was like a mortal standing on flat ground suddenly being grabbed by a large hand and instantly lifted high into the sky, entering the void. That's right. The distance between the trichiliocosm and the divine world was like the distance between a mortal and the void. It seemed that they were not far apart, one in the sky and one on the ground. But in reality there was a transparent barrier between the two. Those who were not strong enough would never be able to break through it. It was also like a fish in the sea, looking up at the sky across the frozen sea. Unless the fish turned into a dragon, it would not be able to break through the ice and fly in the sky. Swoosh! Just as Ji Tianqing was comprehending with all his heart, the power of heavenly Tao wrapped around him, broke through the barrier between the two worlds, and entered the divine world. In an instant, the majesty of the heavenly Tao was even more powerful and vast, and an even more vast aura filled his body. Even the pressure and divine power around him suddenly became hundreds of times denser. In other words, the pressure he was under also became enormous. Such a strange yet familiar feeling caused a thought to flash through Ji Tianqing's mind. Divine world, I'm back! In the next moment, he entered a sea of dazzling divine light, and only the sound of thunder and splashing water could be heard. The invisible power of heavenly Tao that wrapped around him also quietly disappeared. Ji Tianqing stopped in the middle of the colorful ocean, quietly floating in the air. The familiar feeling calmed him down, and he opened his eyes to look around. He saw that he was surrounded by boundless light purple seawater, which was crackling with electric arcs and thunderclaps. In the sea, there were colorful divine lights mixed in, and they were incomparably gorgeous. Chapter 2766. This scene in front of him, Ji Tianqing was very familiar with. This was the Ascension Pool. There were thousands in the divine world, and there were also thousands in the dragon realm, and they were exactly the same. The seemingly faint purple ocean was actually lightning liquid condensed from divine lightning. Therefore, the Ascension Pool was also called the Lightning Pool. The ascenders from the 3,000 worlds, after entering the Lightning Pool, would be tempered by the lightning liquid. This way, the divine body would be tempered and strengthened further, becoming even stronger, and also able to adapt to the enormous pressure of the divine world faster. After all, the divine world was an eternal main world, the spatial barrier was 1,000 times stronger, heaven and earth divine power was also 1,000 times stronger. Living, walking, flying, and fighting in the divine world was 1,000 times harder than in the mortal world. Regarding this point, Ji Tianqing understood it very thoroughly. He had long been prepared to borrow the lightning pool to further increase his strength. The rainbow divine light mixed in the endless lightning liquid was divine power of 8 different attributes. There was blood soul divine power, frost ice divine power, heavenly wind divine power, star divine power, longevity divine power, transformation divine power, spatial divine power, and soul-shaping divine power. These 8 divine powers all had different effects. The first 4 divine powers were more common, most ascenders mastered the corresponding laws. And the last 4 divine powers were all heavenly deity-level powers. Normally speaking, 99% of ascenders could not master these 4 types of powers. Apart from divine lightning and the 8 divine powers, a 9th type of power would occasionally appear in the ascension pool. That was the opportunity bestowed by the heavenly Tao at random. What kind of opportunity was it? What power? When did it descend? Nobody knew these. There had once been many strong people who spent tens of thousands of years to study the law of opportunity's appearance. The conclusion was that there was no law at all. However, the ascenders who obtained the opportunity would all possess extremely powerful combat strength or extraordinary natural endowments. As long as these people did not die prematurely, they would all have great achievements. The worst could reach the Divine Lord realm, and most of the lucky ones became divine kings. It was precisely because of this that the heavenly Tao opportunity appeared incomparably mysterious and incomparably precious. But very unfortunately, almost all ascenders came to the divine world for the first time. They were filled with the unknown and reverence towards the divine world, and did not know the existence of opportunity at all. Therefore, ascenders who could obtain lucky chances were all 1 in a million lucky people. Ji Tianqing stayed in the lightning pool for a while before he sorted out his thoughts and plans. First, he let everyone enter the lightning pool to receive the baptism and transformation. After that, he refined the divine power within the lightning pool and condensed the divine Tao laws. Then, he would break through to the heavenly God realm and condense a Godhead. After making up his mind, he began to check on the situation of the heaven-mending pearl. The heaven-mending bead was still floating in his sea of consciousness, completely undamaged. Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and continued to check. Inside the heaven-mending pearl, the 1 billion kilometers of space was still intact. The 5 elements world was also peaceful, and nothing unexpected happened. Only then did Ji Tianqing feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Then, he released Yunyao, Jiko, and the others. Swoosh! Swoosh! Everyone flew out of the heaven-mending pearl one after another and entered the lightning pool. Before everyone ascended, Jiku and the White Dragon had introduced them to the lightning pool. But when everyone stood in the lightning pool and saw the beautiful scenery around them, they couldn't help but cry out in surprise. We've finally ascended to the divine realm. Divine realm, my little white dragon in the waves is back. Wow. It's indeed a vast sea formed by lightning liquid. Second mother didn't lie to me. Soaking in the lightning pool doesn't hurt at all. It's very comfortable. What a gorgeous divine light, shining in the lightning liquid. I've changed my mind. Not only do I want to cultivate the divine thunder law, but I also want to refine a few more types of energy and condense them into laws. Everyone was excited, full of joy and anticipation. Ji Tianqing understood everyone's feelings. After waiting for a while and waiting for everyone to calm down, he reminded them, the ascension pool is formed by the will of the heavenly Tao. It's absolutely safe here. Everyone can cultivate without worry. No one will disturb you. Use the lightning liquid to temper your body while refining various types of divine power. Everyone, do your best. Try to refine as many types of divine power as possible. After breaking through to the heavenly God realm, you can condense a divine spark. No matter who finishes cultivating first, don't be in a hurry to leave the lightning pool. Wait for everyone, because we still don't know what's going on outside the lightning pool. After pausing for a while, he added, if everyone discovers the 9th type of mysterious energy, you must inform everyone. That's a heavenly Tao opportunity. Of course, the probability of a heavenly Tao opportunity appearing is very low. There's no need for everyone to search for it. Everyone heard it clearly and nodded to show that they understood. Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating for everyone to disperse and do their own things. After everyone left, he stopped where he was and began to cultivate. First, I'll refine the power of the divine thunder, then the other types of divine power. As this thought flashed through his mind, Ji Tianqing started to cultivate and absorb the power of the lightning liquid. The lightning liquid in the lightning pool was the purest form of divine thunder without any impurities. Ji Tianqing had already grasped a few types of lightning, so refining them was twice the result with half the effort. In a short 3 days, he had refined the power of the divine thunder to the limit. Then, he absorbed the dark red divine light from the purple lightning liquid and refined the blood divine power. This was the power of a true god. It could greatly strengthen one's body, bloodline, and physique. Logically speaking, Ji Tianqing's body should have been strengthened to the limit long ago. Even if he refined the blood divine power, it could not be strengthened anymore. However, that was in the mortal world, where there was the suppression of the heavenly Tao. Now that he was in the divine world, he was no longer suppressed by the heavenly Tao and could rapidly increase his strength. In a mere 4 days, Ji Tianqing grasped the blood divine power and his body was strengthened 9 times. Next was the ice divine power. This was also the power of a true god. It was the evolution of the water divine power of the 5 elements. Ji Tianqing did not mind. He absorbed the ice blue divine light from the lightning liquid and quickly refined it. Third was the heavenly wind divine power. It was also the power of a true god. After refining it, flying in the divine world would be several times faster. Ji Tianqing accepted it all. Ji Tianqing ignored the 4th star divine power. He had already grasped the laws of the stars. Next, there were the longevity, transformation, space, and soul sculpting divine powers, all of which were at the heavenly god level. Space divine power was directly excluded. The longevity divine power could greatly increase one's lifespan and strengthen one's body and soul. Almost all heavenly gods could refine this power. The transformation divine power was amazing. After mastering it, one could change their size and even take on various shapes. Its effect was similar to the 72 transformations. As for the soul sculpting divine power, it specialized in strengthening one's soul. It could strengthen one's soul and slightly increase one's talent and comprehension. Ji Tianqing accepted all 3 of these heavenly god-level powers. After 28 days, Ji Tianqing successfully refined 7 types of divine power. At the same time, the lightning liquid's refinement had also reached its peak. His bloodline, flesh, blood, divine power, and soul were all strengthened in all aspects. His overall combat strength had increased by at least 6 times. Next, Ji Tianqing naturally broke through the true god level and stepped into the heavenly god level. Chapter 2767. Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged in the lightning liquid, both eyes tightly shut. He was currently breaking through to the celestial deity realm and had already maintained this posture for half a month without moving. Dazzling 5-colored divine light enveloped his entire body, flickering indeterminately. Right at this moment, the vast and surging divine power in his body boiled to the peak, successfully breaking through the shackles. Boom! It was only to hear thunder erupting from within his body, giving off a series of muffled sounds like a flash flood. Just like that, he reached the celestial deity realm without any difficulty. Of course, he was only at the 1st level celestial deity realm right now. He still had not finished cultivating, continuing to sit cross-legged, circulating and assaulting the next realm. The terrifying power accumulated in his body was still continuing to boil, surging in his bloodline and divine body. After all, his strength foundation before ascending already reached 99 times, the mortal realm limit. 7 days later, another muffled rumbling of thunder sounded out from Ji Tianqing's body again. He released divine light once more, his entire body shining with 5-colored brilliance. Second-level celestial deity realm already. But he did not stop yet, still assaulting the next realm. 8 days later, third-level celestial deity realm. 18 days later, fourth-level celestial deity realm. A month later, fifth-level celestial deity realm. Ji Tianxing originally thought that his potential and foundation would help him charge to the 5th level, and it would calm down. But he did not expect that the vast and surging divine power in his body was still violent and fierce. Continue cultivating. Another half a month later. Rumble. The familiar muffled thunder sounded out from his body once more. He actually broke through to the 6th-level celestial deity realm. Only all the way until now did the boiling divine blood and divine power gradually calm down. Ji Tianxing was deeply gratified, circulating and regulating his breathing for 3 days, stabilizing his divine Tao foundation. All the accumulation done in the mortal realm previously was for today's eruption. Originally, I could only erupt to the 5th level. Previously, I refined 7 types of divine power before I could erupt to the 6th-level celestial deity realm. It's worth it. Ji Tianxing was very satisfied. Then, he started condensing divine Tao laws. The first one was naturally divine lightning laws. In the mortal realm, he grasped the power of lightning before transcending the tribulation. Now, condensing divine lightning laws was simply as easy as flipping his hand. In just 5 days, he had successfully merged the 4 types of lightning with the Heaven's Path divine lightning in the lightning pool. He had used 5 different types of divine lightning to condense the most unique divine lightning law. He was definitely at the heavenly god tier, perhaps even far beyond the heavenly god tier. The second was the law of blood. It only took him 8 days to successfully condense it. The third was the law of ice. Similarly, it took him 8 days to successfully condense it. The fourth law was the heavenly wind law. It was still completed in 8 days. Next, he needed to condense heavenly god-level nomological laws, which was slightly more difficult. He had successfully condensed the longevity law in 15 days. The law of transformation was completed in 16 days. The law of soul molding was completed in 18 days. At this point, Ji Tianxing had finished cultivating for more than 150 days. Close to half a year. He had broken through to the 6th level of the heavenly god realm and grasped 11 types of divine Tao laws. But this was not the end. The most important thing had come. Condense a godhead. Even though Ji Tianxing reached the 6th level celestial deity realm and grasped 11 laws. However, he was still not a true heavenly god. Only those who had condensed a godhead could be considered a true heavenly god. The method of condensing a godhead, Ji Tianxing could not be any more familiar with it. 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical forms plus a lifetime of divine power, then fusing all of the divine Tao laws, it would be a success. But this process was dangerous and tedious, consuming a lot of time. Ji Tianxing had plenty of patience. He continued to cultivate. First, use the divine soul as the foundation, then muster up his lifetime of divine power, the 2 fusing. 3 months later, the divine soul and divine power successfully fused without any errors. After the 2 fused, they formed a thumb-sized 5-colored light ball. This ball of light was the embryonic form of the godhead. Then, Ji Tianxing fused divine Tao laws inside. From simple to difficult, from low to high. Starting from the 5 elements laws, then star law, ice law, heavenly wind law, blood law. Each law that was successfully condensed would add a hint of dazzling color to that ball of light. Following that, Ji Tianxing started condensing the 6 great celestial deity level laws. Time passed silently. He was immersed in condensing laws, his mind undistracted. It had already been 10 months since everyone entered the ascension pool. Everyone ended cultivation one after another. Just as Ji Ku said previously, everyone broke through to the celestial deity realm. Even everyone's strength realm, she basically guessed it right too. Ji Wushuang was the first to end cultivation. Third-level celestial deity realm, grasped 5 kinds of divine Tao laws, successfully condensing a godhead. Qian Yu and Black Dragon ended cultivation soon after, a month later than Ji Wushuang. Same as Ji Wushuang, they were also third-level celestial deity realm. However, the two of them grasped 7 kinds of divine Tao laws, successfully condensing a godhead. Following that, White Dragon completed cultivation. 4th-level celestial deity realm, successfully condensing a godhead, grasping 10 kinds of divine Tao laws. Before long, Jiku also completed cultivation. 5th-level celestial deity realm, also condensed 10 kinds of divine Tao laws in the godhead. The last to complete cultivation was Yun Yao. 5th-level celestial deity realm, condensed 12 kinds of laws in the godhead. She condensed 1 more law than Ji Tianqing. After all, she already fused 6 divine beads. The divine Tao laws that Ji Tianqing grasped, she also grasped all of them. But her 6th divine bead was light divine power. Therefore, she condensed 1 more light law than Ji Tianqing. After everyone finished cultivating one after another, seeing that Ji Tianqing was still cultivating, they did not make a sound to disturb him. Staying on the spot to adjust his breathing made everyone feel bored. Hence, Ji Wushuang, Qian Yu, Black Dragon, and White Dragon all left, exploring the vast lightning pool. Everyone was very curious, just how big was the mysterious lightning pool formed by heavenly Tao? What kind of profound mysteries were hidden inside? Also, the heavenly Tao lucky chance that Ji Tianqing mentioned before, what the hell was that? Just like this, the 2 people and the 2 divine beasts split up and moved about, cruising and exploring in the lightning pool. Roughly more than a month later, Ji Wushuang flew out several million miles. There was no one in the surroundings for several 100,000 miles. This curious baby, from the initial curiosity and longing, gradually felt bored. She only wanted to know how big the lightning pool was, and if there were other gorgeous sights. In the end, the lightning pool seemed to be limitless, forever without end. The sights that she saw were also unchanged. Purple lightning liquid flickering with lightning layers of 7-colored divine light. There was nothing else. Not fun at all. Ji Wushuang gradually lost patience, pursing her small mouth, planning to return. But just as she turned around, she suddenly discovered that in the lightning liquid tens of thousands of miles away, there seemed to be a black light flashing. What is that? She clearly remembered that in the light purple lightning pool, there was a gorgeous 7-colored divine light, but there was no black light. Hence, curiosity drove her to fly towards that black light. 2 hours later, she flew tens of thousands of miles away before arriving in front of the mysterious black light. It turned out that it was a ball of black divine light with a radius of 100 feet. Like a whirlpool, it slowly moved in the lightning pool, bobbing up and down. Although this black whirlpool looked a little strange, even a little eerie, Ji Wushuang did not feel scared. However, Ji Wushuang did not feel afraid. After observing for a long time, he plucked up his courage and reached out to touch it. Chapter 2768. Swoosh. Ji Wushuang's small white hand had just touched the black vortex when she felt a powerful devouring force. The surging divine power in her body immediately surged towards the black vortex like a flood that opened the floodgates. This made her alarmed, instinctively wanting to withdraw her hand. But how shocking was the black vortex's devouring power! Her hand was sucked in firmly, unable to withdraw at all. Ji Wushuang's mouth twitched, and she could not help muttering, "What is this thing, actually wanting to devour my divine power?" No choice, she had just broken through to the 3rd level of the celestial deity realm, and had just condensed her divine spark. Her divine Tao foundation was not stable enough, and her control of divine power was also not perfect enough. In her anxiety, she only wanted to withdraw her hand as soon as possible, desperately erupting with divine power for this. But this way, her divine power surged even more violently, increasingly pouring into the black vortex uncontrollably. In a short 10 breaths of time, 20% of her divine power was devoured. In less than a dozen breaths of time, her divine power would be completely devoured. At that time, her divine spark would be damaged, and her divine Tao foundation would also be damaged. Very soon, Ji Wuxuang forced herself to calm down, muttering in her heart, "No, I absolutely cannot panic. Father and mother both taught me, the more important the matter, the calmer I must be." Hence, she no longer struggled in a panic, allowing the black vortex to imprison her hand. She also did not urge her divine power, instead using her mind to suppress the divine power in her body. This move was very effective. The surging divine power in her body was quickly suppressed. The remaining 80% of divine power became docile and tamed, firmly staying in her body. At this time, the black vortex could not devour any more divine power, and its spinning speed also slowed down greatly. The black vortex's devouring power gradually weakened. Ji Wuxuang carefully withdrew her hand, letting out a sigh of relief as if relieved of a heavy burden. "Too scary, I don't want to touch this strange thing anymore." Ji Wuxuang rubbed his reddened little hands as he retreated. She could tell that the black vortex was not to be trifled with, but it was not some living thing. Instead, it was a special kind of power. She suddenly recalled the words her father said before entering closed-door cultivation. Her clear eyes suddenly brightened, revealing a look of surprise and anticipation. Father said before, the lightning pool only has 8 attributes of divine power other than lightning liquid. Then this black vortex was the 9th type of godly power. Could this be the heavenly Tao, fated chance that Father was talking about? How could I be so lucky to have encountered it? Ji Wuxuang already had 60 to 70% confidence in his heart. Instantly, he was filled with joy and revealed a smile on his face. But she wasn't sure, and she couldn't do anything to the black vortex. Thus, she left a mark near the black vortex and quickly turned around to look for her mother. In any case, the black vortex was moving very slowly. Within half a month, it wouldn't be able to move beyond a radius of 10,000 miles. In the middle of the lightning pool, Yunyao, Jiku, White Dragon, and the 2 mythical beasts all ended their cultivation one after another. Everyone was reborn, their strength increased by more than 20 times. At this moment, everyone was gathered together, waiting for Ji Tianxing to finish his cultivation. Originally, the White Dragon and the 2 divine beasts were bored and went to explore the lightning pool. However, after searching for a month, they didn't find anything. The scenes that entered his eyes didn't change at all. After a long time, they felt bored and returned one after another. Everyone stared at Ji Tianxing with burning gazes. Seeing that his entire body was shrouded in 7-colored divine light, they could not resist guessing. Tianxing has long completed his breakthrough and reached celestial deity realm. His foundation is incomparably deep, stronger than all of us. He actually broke through to 6th-level celestial deity realm. Big Brother Tianxing completed his breakthrough a few months ago and is currently condensing his divine spark. I wonder how many kinds of divine Tao laws he grasped? Before ascending, Master already grasped 4 kinds of laws. There are 8 kinds of divine powers in this lightning pool. Apart from star and spatial power, he can grasp 6 kinds of powers and condense 6 kinds of laws. Which is also to say that old Ji can condense a total of 10 kinds of divine Tao laws. No, it should be 11 kinds. Most likely, don't forget, the lightning liquid is formed from pure divine lightning and can help him condense divine lightning laws. Just as everyone was discussing, a streak of 5-colored divine light sped over from afar. Still very far away, Yun Yao and Ji Ku sensed a familiar aura and both revealed smiles. Shuang is finally back. This girl left for more than a month. She must be tired of playing now before coming back. That streak of 5-colored divine light was indeed Ji Wuxuang. Before long, she flew back in front of everyone. She looked at Yun Yao and Ji Ku excitedly and hurriedly shouted, "Mother, second mother, I discovered a black vortex that doesn't belong to those 8 kinds of divine powers. If I didn't guess wrongly, that must be a heavenly Tao opportunity. Quickly follow me." Ji Wushuang waved her little hands excitedly, urging everyone to follow her to find the black vortex. She looked like she was afraid that the black vortex would disappear if they returned late. Everyone was shocked. Then, they revealed a look of joy and surprise. Black vortex? The 9th kind of divine power? If it's really the 9th kind of divine power, then it's extremely likely to be a heavenly Tao opportunity. I didn't expect that we didn't discover anything after searching for more than a month. Little junior sister is blessed with fortune to actually encounter a heavenly Tao opportunity. Everyone quickly calmed down and planned to follow Ji Wushuang to check the situation. However, Yun Yao said, "Shuang your father hasn't finished cultivating yet. Mother will wait for him here. Cuckoo, bring everyone to find the black vortex." Ji Ku hurriedly shook her head and said, "Eldest senior sister, bring everyone to check the situation. I'll stay here and wait for big brother Tianqing." The two discussed for a moment and decided just like that. Yun Yao brought Ji Wushuang, the white dragon, and the 2 divine beasts to search for the black vortex. Ji Ku stayed behind to wait for Ji Tianqing. Of course, before Ji Wushuang left, she gave Ji Ku the direction and approximate distance. Not long after, Yun Yao, Ji Wushuang, and the others left. Only Ji Ku and Ji Tianqing, who was cultivating in seclusion, were left behind. Day after day. Another half a month passed. Ji Tianqing finally ended his cultivation. He finally condensed 11 Tao laws together and completed the condensation of a divine core. His divine soul, lifetime of divine power, and 11 Tao laws all condensed together, forming a thumb-sized divine core suffused with a 7-colored brilliance. The divine core's appearance was like a gem, but it was not round like a ball. Its surface was like a rhombus-shaped crystal. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the surface of the divine core was divided into 11 pieces, each of different colors. This meant that his divine core had condensed 11 types of divine Tao laws. In the future, the more divine Tao laws he condensed, the more rhombus-shaped surfaces of the divine core. Back then, he was a peak divine king. His divine core was exquisite to the extreme and actually had more than 1,500 rhombus-shaped surfaces. In other words, there were 3,000 divine ability great Tao under the heavenly Tao, and he had grasped a full half of them. Chapter 2769. Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw that his surroundings were empty. There was only Ji Ku. Without waiting for him to ask, Ji Ku took the initiative to explain, "Big brother Tianqing, Shuang discovered the 9th type of divine power. It's a black vortex. I'll let eldest senior sister lead them there first. I'll wait for you here." Ji Tianqing was overjoyed. He asked in disbelief, "You really discovered the 9th type of divine power? Is it really a heavenly Tao opportunity? I didn't expect that the legends of the dragon and god realms were actually true." Ji Ku hurriedly nodded and said with relief, "Shuang is really lucky. She actually discovered a small black vortex in the boundless lightning pool. Bai Long, Qian Yu, and Black Dragon also went to explore the lightning pool. They searched for more than a month but found nothing." Ji Tianqing did not waste any more time. He hurriedly got up and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go and take a look." Ji Ku hurriedly led the way for him and flew towards the southeast. The two of them shuttled through the lightning pool. Ji Ku could not help but ask, "Big brother Tianqing, how many nomological laws did you condense during your breakthrough this time?" 11, Ji Tianqing answered without hesitation. Ji Ku nodded. "It's just as everyone expected." Ji Tianqing asked, "Everyone finished cultivating? How are the results?" Ji Ku answered truthfully, "They're all done." Shuang-Er has reached the third level of the celestial god realm and has condensed 5 nomological laws. Qian Yu and Black Dragon are also at the third level of the celestial god realm and have condensed 7 nomological laws. Jiku gave a brief introduction of everyone's situation. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing nodded in satisfaction. It's better than I expected. Looks like everyone has gained a lot in the lightning pool. Especially Yao Yao, she actually condensed 12 nomological laws. The two of them hurried on. 10 days later, they flew more than 4 million kilometers. Ji Tianxing's divine sense detected the auras of Yun Yao and the others from tens of thousands of miles away. They are there. Let's go. Not long after, Ji Tianxing and Ji Ko landed beside everyone. Yun Yao, Ji Wushuang, and the others were surrounding a black light vortex, carefully observing it. Seeing Ji Tianxing's arrival, Yun Yao and the others greeted him one after another. Ji Wushuang stepped out from the crowd and pulled Ji Tianxing's hand. He pointed at the black vortex and said, "Father, that's the mysterious vortex I discovered. This is the 9th type of divine power, and it should be the heavenly Tao opportunity that you mentioned. Unfortunately, we've all tried, but no one can refine it." Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He pinched Ji Wushuang's cute little face and said, "Darling, Wushuang's luck is truly heaven-defying. I'm so envious that you actually encountered a heavenly Tao opportunity that's 1 in 10,000. After saying that, Ji Tianxing looked at Yun Yao and asked, "Yao Yao, have you figured out the situation? What is this black light vortex?" Yun Yao nodded and said helplessly, "This is a very special type of divine power. It's a little similar to a black hole, but it's not. All of us have tried, but we can't refine it at all. Moreover, no matter what type of divine power it is, it will be devoured as soon as it gets close." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and walked in front of the black light vortex. He used his divine eye mystic technique to observe it. After 2 months, the black light vortex had devoured everyone's divine power, but there were no obvious changes. It was still 100 feet wide, and it was slowly flowing in the lightning pool. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment and saw some clues. This black divine power was indeed very similar to a black hole. It could devour all kinds of power. However, it was a heavenly Tao power after all. It would not devour the lightning liquid and the 8 types of divine power in the lightning pool. Ji Tianxing used 11 laws and released divine power of different attribute. He continuously shot out 11 sword light. In the end, all the sword lights were devoured by the vortex. Interesting. This is probably the legendary devouring divine power, Ji Tianxing said with a smile. Everyone frowned, revealing puzzled and curious expressions. Devouring divine power? It can devour divine power of different attributes? What grade is this divine power? It's very powerful, right? Why is it legendary? Have you not seen it before? Ji Tianxing nodded and explained to everyone. Back in the divine realm, I heard of an ancient legend. About 20,000 years ago, a peerless genius appeared in the boundless heaven continent. This person was originally a lowly warrior of the Zhuoyuo clan, but because of a fortuitous encounter, his life completely changed. He became a god at 30 years old, a heaven god at 100 years old, a god lord at 300 years old, and a god king at 800 years old. Such a heaven-defying advancement speed broke the tens of thousands of years of the divine realm's history. He could be called the number 1 genius in the divine realm. Originally, the Zhuoyuo clan was a vassal of the great Yen divine race. They existed like slaves and lived a miserable life of being enslaved. It was precisely because of the appearance of this heaven-defying genius that the Zhuoyuo clan became unprecedentedly powerful. He commanded tens of millions of Zhuoyuo clan warriors and overthrew the great Yen divine race's rule. He seized more than a dozen divine nations of the great Yen divine race and established himself as the Zhuoyuo Empire. Even many of the great Yen divine race's experts, monarchs, and leaders were killed by him one by one. Such a glorious and proud battle record could be said to have shocked the boundless heaven continent. Even the other 3 continents spread his legend. The entire divine realm spread his title, Divine King Juluo. When they heard this, Bai Long and Qian Yu looked forward to it. Ji Wushuang was also quite impressed and full of curiosity. Yun Yao heard the key point and asked, in that case, that Divine King Juluo was able to rise against the heavens because of this mysterious black light? Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, that's right. Legend has it that Divine King Juluo's divine power is this mysterious black light. It can devour and annihilate all divine power. He can transform into an abyss that blots out the sky and instantly devour 100,000 heavenly gods of the great Yen divine race and devour all of their divine power. He is invincible. The more heavenly gods he kills, the stronger his devouring power. To put it simply, he almost doesn't need to cultivate himself. He only needs to devour the power of other heavenly gods to quickly become stronger. Ji Ku, Bai Long, and the others were enlightened. I see. No wonder Divine King Juluo rose so quickly. Devouring the power of other heavenly gods without cultivating himself? This is simply heaven-defying. Ji Wushuang was also full of longing and could not help but say, Wushuang doesn't like to cultivate in seclusion. If I can obtain this power, I can become stronger without cultivating. How good would that be? She was pure and kind. Not only did she not like to cultivate, but she also did not like fighting and killing. Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. This mysterious devouring power has a heaven-defying effect, but it's also a fatal poison. Divine King Juluo relied on his devouring power to defeat the great Yen divine race in 800 years and ruled over a dozen divine nations. He was dazzling and brilliant to the extreme. However, he was short-lived in the end. After only 200 years of being the Juluo divine race's monarch, he exploded and died. There was no helping it. His strength grew too quickly, and his divine Tao foundation was chaotic and violent. There were many fatal flaws. Moreover, he was too conceited and arrogant. He offended many powerful divine races. In the end, he died tragically under the siege of several heavenly gods and turned into ashes. Chapter 2770. Ji Tianxing's story was short. The content was also rather rough, or even crude. However, they were all smart people. After thinking for a bit, they understood the reason behind it and started to discuss it. Cultivating martial and divine Daos is like building a tall building. One has to lay a good foundation, layer by layer, until the building is completed. Only then can the building be stable for hundreds or thousands of years without collapsing. Divine King Juluo used the devouring technique to seize the power of other gods. His growth was rapid, but his divine Tao foundation was like a building that was built haphazardly. Not only was the foundation unstable, but the layers were also filled with impurities. There were even many flaws and loopholes. It's fine if the building isn't tall, but when it reaches a certain height, it will collapse. Yes, this analogy is very vivid. That's why cultivating martial and divine Daos requires one to take one step at a time. One can't be greedy for shortcuts. No matter how powerful a god king is, no matter how heaven-defying a genius is, it's just a flash in the pan. It's like a shooting star in the sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. What's the point? It's a pity that God King Juluo died. If he was wise enough, he would have conserved his energy when he reached the peak and eliminated his danger first. Forgetting to fight will lead to danger, and fighting will lead to death. When Ji Wushuang heard the adults discussing, she couldn't help but pout, feeling somewhat indignant. She looked up at Ji Tianxing and revealed a reluctant expression. Father, are you saying that this devouring divine power will harm people? It's a fatal poison, and we can't refine it? Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. He explained, Wushuang, this is a fortuitous encounter of the heavenly Tao. It's a divine power that billions of gods yearn for even in their dreams. It wasn't easy for us to encounter it. How can we give it up? Ji Wuxiang nodded and then asked, "But you just said that God King Jiluo was killed by this kind of divine power." Ji Tianxing explained patiently, God King Jiluo's foresight, knowledge, and ability weren't enough. He didn't have the ability to control the devouring divine power. He was born lowly and had been oppressed and enslaved by the great Yen god clan for generations. He had long hated them to the core. Therefore, after he obtained the fortuitous encounter, he madly increased his strength, madly slaughtering and taking revenge. By the time he was strong enough and discovered the problem with his body, it was already too late. There was no way to cure it, which led to his death. But we're different. We won't be as impatient as him, raising our strength without regard for the consequences. Only then did Ji Wuxiang dispel the misgivings in his heart. His little face revealed a slight smile as he said with a nod, I knew that father would definitely be able to solve this problem. Yun Yao smiled bitterly and reminded her, Shuang we can't refine the devouring godly power. Don't be happy too early. Hearing her words, everyone woke up from their joy and looked at Ji Tianxing in unison. Yun Yao's eyes were also full of expectation. She said earnestly, Tianxing, only you and Ku haven't tried it yet. Ji Tianxing nodded and said to Ji Ku, Ku, try and see if you can refine it. Ji Ku did not hesitate. He stepped in front of the black light vortex and raised his palms to release the 5-colored divine flame, which he injected into the black light vortex. Swoosh! In an instant, the incomparably violent 5-colored divine flame expelled the surrounding lightning liquid. With her as the center, the area within a radius of 1,000 feet became empty. However, when the 5-colored divine flame entered the black light vortex, it was immediately swallowed. There was not even a spark. She had already expected this result, so she was not discouraged. She released her divine sense to refine the black light vortex. After 10 breaths, the result was out. It was still useless. As soon as her divine sense entered the black light vortex, it was completely swallowed. Next, she tried her best and tried several methods. The result was failure. I can't refine the devouring godly power either. Ji Ku shook his head helplessly and retreated into the crowd. Everyone's gaze fell on Ji Tianxing. His expression became serious. Under everyone's gaze, he walked to the black light vortex. Everyone had already tried the 5 elements, star, ice, wind, and other godly powers. He did not waste time trying. He directly released the earth, transformation, and godly thunder laws. Swoosh! 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 3 godly powers of different colors flew into the black light vortex. In the blink of an eye, the 3 godly powers were swallowed. Not a single drop was left. Ji Tianxing failed. He released an invisible divine sense and slowly approached the black light vortex. After 10 breaths, his divine sense was also swallowed by the black light. He failed again. Next, he forced out a drop of divine blood and injected it into the black light vortex. He wanted to use the divine blood to refine the devouring godly power using a secret technique. However, after 15 minutes, the divine blood was swallowed, and the secret technique also failed. Ji Tianxing frowned. His expression became even more serious. Everyone was also worried. They secretly transmitted their voices to discuss. The heavenly path opportunity is right in front of us, but we can't refine it. How worrying! Brother Tianxing even used the divine blood, but he still can't do anything. What should we do? We can't just look at the heavenly path opportunity and give up helplessly, right? Even Master can't refine it. What kind of fortuitous encounter did Divine King Jiluo have back then? Everyone was worried and anxious for Ji Tianxing. Their hearts were filled with unwillingness. Even Ji Tianxing clenched her small fists and silently cheered for Ji Tianxing. At this moment, Ji Tianxing thought of an idea. He took out the sword of burial of heaven. Swoosh! He poured godly power into the sword of burial of heaven, and used the power of the divine sword and the origin stone to refine the black light vortex. However, the terrifying sword light released by the sword of burial of heaven and the power released by the origin stone were also swallowed by the vortex. Everyone's expressions became more and more serious. They felt even more despair. Ji Tianqing was silent. He did not give up. He thought for a moment and took out the heaven-mending orb in his mind. He flew toward the black light vortex. Swoosh! The heaven-mending orb released a dense white light that enveloped the vortex within a radius of 10 feet. Immediately, the black light vortex spun faster and crazily swallowed the holy white light. Ji Tianqing did not stop it. He continued to urge the heaven-mending orb's power. The black light vortex was like a bottomless pit. It swallowed the holy white light even more crazily. Seeing this scene, everyone sighed inwardly. Their eyes and mood became gloomy. Obviously, the heaven-mending orb was useless. However, Ji Tianqing did not give up. He was still urging the heaven-mending orb's power. He even quickly absorbed the godly power in the lightning pool and transferred it to the heaven-mending orb. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, unknowingly, an hour had passed. Everyone was no longer worried and anxious. They had already given up hope. And at this moment, the black light vortex swallowed a huge amount of holy white light. It seemed to be full. The speed at which it swallowed the holy white light gradually slowed down. The spinning speed also became slower and slower until it completely stopped. Seeing this scene, everyone's gloomy eyes became bright. Hope was born in their hearts again. Ji Tianqing also felt relieved. However, he did not dare to relax. He continued to manipulate the heaven-mending orb's power to refine the black light vortex. Chapter 2771. Although the black vortex could devour all kinds of divine power, it could even use divine power of various attributes as nourishment to strengthen itself. However, the power of the heaven-mending orb was very special. The black vortex could not devour it. In just an hour, the vortex was filled with sacred white light. As a result, the power of the black vortex was suppressed. Ji Tianqing activated the power of the heaven-mending orb again. He wrapped the black vortex with white light and began to gradually refine it. 15 minutes later, the heaven-mending orb successfully refined a wisp of black light and absorbed it into the heaven-mending orb. Ji Tianqing's eyelids moved, and he thought to himself, "It's done." That's right, he had taken the second step to success. Next, he focused on controlling the heaven-mending orb and continued to refine the black light. As more and more black light was refined by the heaven-mending orb, a black line appeared on the sacred white heaven-mending orb. Yunyao, Jiku, and the others knew that this was a real success. Everyone was relieved. They secretly breathed a sigh of relief and smiled happily. What they had to do was wait patiently. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days passed. 6 days later, half of the black vortex with a radius of 10 feet had been refined by the heaven-mending orb. A quarter of the pure white divine orb had also turned pure black. 12 days later, the black vortex disappeared. All of the engulfing divine power had been refined by the heaven-mending orb. The pure white heaven-mending orb had become half black and half white. In this way, not only did it not destroy the holiness of the heaven-mending orb, it made it even more mysterious. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing ended the spell and put the heaven-mending orb back into his body. Everyone immediately gathered around and began to discuss joyfully. Great! We finally got the opportunity of the heavenly Tao. Tianqing, how do you feel now? Has your strength increased? Master, the engulfing divine power has been refined by your divine orb. How will you use it in the future? Old Ji, are you going to use the engulfing divine power to quickly increase your strength? Will there be any danger? Ji Tianqing waved his hand to silence the crowd. He held Ji Wushuang's little hand and said apologetically, "Wushuang, You were the one who discovered this devouring godly power. Father should have given it to you. However, only the heaven-mending orb could refine it. In the future, only I can use it. You won't blame me, right? Ji Wuxuang wrapped her arms around his neck and shook her head with a smile. Shuang is more than happy that Father can refine the heavenly Tao's opportunity. How could I blame you? Moreover, the devouring divine power is too special. Only you can refine and control it. If you give it to me, I won't be able to refine it. Instead, I'll be harmed by it. Ji Tianxing's heart was filled with gratification. He pinched her cute little nose and said, Shuang is still the most sensible. You are indeed Father's intimate little jacket. With that said, he said to everyone, Divine King Jiluo was harmed because of himself. I will not repeat the same mistake. The devouring godly power had a heaven-defying effect, but it was a double-edged sword that had to be used carefully. I will use it with the help of the heaven-mending orb. It will speed up my growth and not burden me. Everyone finally understood that he had only temporarily stopped using the devouring godly power. If he wanted to use it freely or even control it himself, he would need some time. This matter was over. Ji Tianxing brought everyone and flew upwards to leave the lightning pool. Alright, everyone has finished transforming. Now it's time to see the outside world. Everyone followed Ji Tianxing. They passed through the endless lightning liquid and flew towards the top of the lightning pool. The lightning pool was very deep. Everyone flew for half an hour and passed through the lightning liquid that was thousands of miles deep before they reached the top of the lightning pool. Swoosh! As everyone left the water surface, countless splashes appeared on the calm lightning pool. The purple lightning liquid exploded into thousands of lightning arcs in the sky, giving off crackling sounds. After a while, everyone flew to 1,000 miles above the lightning pool. Above them was the azure sky. Below them was the surface of the lightning pool, which was thousands of miles in radius. There were majestic mountains in all directions, and on the eastern side of the lightning pool, on the nearest mountain, there were rows upon rows of palaces and houses. Seeing this scene, everyone started to discuss with each other. Strange, when we were in the lightning pool, it felt like it was boundless and terrifying. Why is it only 1,000 miles in radius after leaving the lightning pool? Maybe the bottom of the lightning pool is very wide and the exit is very small, like a gourd. I don't think so. The lightning pool is formed by the will of the heavenly Tao. How magical is that? It must be that the lightning pool is only 1,000 miles on the outside, but the space inside is very vast. Just like old Ji's heaven-mending pearl. It looks only the size of a thumb, but it can actually store the 5 elemental worlds. At this moment, Jiku suddenly reminded everyone, be careful and hide yourselves. Do not expose yourself. Ji Wuxuang, Qianyu, and Black Dragon were all stunned. They did not understand what he meant. Ji Tianxing explained, We are quite lucky. The location of this lightning pool is not too remote. A few hundred miles to the east of the lightning pool, there are immortals living on the mountain peak. If those immortals find out that so many of us have ascended together, they will be extremely shocked. The news will spread quickly and cause unnecessary trouble. White Dragon also nodded and said, From what I know, 7 or 8 people have ascended together. This has never happened before. We really need to hide from the limelight to avoid attracting attention and bringing trouble. Jiku added, The immortal realm is too big. There are tens of thousands of races and powerful warriors. This place is not as peaceful as the mortal realm. There are many different powers and only the strong are respected. To put it simply, there were no rules and security in the immortal realm. Battles could happen at any time. Everyone had just ascended to the immortal realm and did not even know where they were. They should not be too conspicuous. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's identity was special. He came here with a deep hatred and wanted to take revenge on the deity king. At this stage, they needed to be stable and develop. After everyone understood this, Ji Tianxing kept them into the 9 heavens, 10 absolutes pagoda. Ever since Ji Ku went through nirvana, he could easily control the God Pagoda. After coming to the immortal realm, the 5 elemental worlds were not restricted by the heavenly Tao. He took out the God Pagoda and carried it with him. At this moment, everyone entered the distorted space of the God Pagoda and started to cultivate. Ji Tianxing moved alone and carried the God Pagoda with him. Of course, he kept the God Pagoda in his body and would not expose it easily. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing flew across the sky at lightning speed and headed east. On a mountain peak 500 miles away, there were dozens of palaces and houses. Clearly, many immortals lived there. He wanted to find out which continent and which region this was. A few seconds later, Ji Tianxing flew to the edge of the lightning pool. A hazy purple light that covered the sky sealed the entire lightning pool. This was the power of the heavenly Tao. One could only leave but not enter. It could protect the lightning pool from being disturbed. Even a deity king could not destroy the purple light, let alone enter the lightning pool. Ji Tianxing passed through the purple light easily and left the lightning pool. However, at this moment, a few balls of 5-colored divine light suddenly lit up on the grassland in front of him. Swoosh! 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 In the blink of an eye, 5 immortals who were close to 10 feet tall and wearing red armor appeared out of thin air. Chapter 2772. Ji Tianxing did not know the divine realm like the back of his hand, but he was not far from it. He could tell at a glance that the 5 tall, burly, and ferocious divine beings before him were divines. The divines referred to divine beings born and raised in the divine realm. To put it simply, they were natives of the divine realm. Compared to the divine beings who ascended from the mortal domain, they had more ancient and powerful bloodlines. Not only were they more talented, but their growth was also faster. They also possessed many unique divine abilities. The 5 divines were dark red all over. Their skin was crystal clear like rubies, and one could vaguely see the golden divine bones within. They had no hair on their bodies. Not only were they bald, but they did not even have eyelashes. Their facial features were sunken, and their eyes were dark gold. They were the great Yen divines. What a coincidence! I was just telling them about divine King Jiluo and the great Yen divines, and now I'm meeting them? Could this be the great Yen divines' territory? Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and muttered to himself. At this moment, the 5 great Yen divines surrounded him. The leader of the great Yen divines sized him up with a sneer and said in a mocking tone, "We've waited for half a year, and only a small fry ascended from the lower realm. Sigh, the ants of the mortal domain are getting more and more useless." There was a hint of disappointment in his tone, and he looked at Ji Tianxing with contempt. Sensing the other party's hostility, Ji Tianxing frowned and asked expressionlessly, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to rob me?" The divine realm revered the strong, and there was no law or order to speak of. Such things were very common. Moreover, the 5 great Yen divines were all 5th-level heavenly gods. If they wanted to stop Ji Tianxing, they would have kicked an iron plate. The 5 divines were stunned for a moment before they laughed mockingly. "Ha ha! Another fellow who's scared out of his wits." The insects of the lower realm were all overlords before they ascended. All of them are very arrogant. Now that they're in the divine realm, they're the lowliest ants. They won't be able to adapt in such a short time. There's no need to talk nonsense with him. Let him wake up and recognize his situation. The leader patted the divine saber on his waist and looked down at Ji Tianxing. He sneered coldly, "Little brat, this is the divine world, the territory of the Bloodfire divine country. It is your honor to be able to ascend to our Bloodflame divine kingdom. However, a small fry from the lower realms like you doesn't have the qualifications to join our Bloodflame divine kingdom's household register. Hand over all the divine artifacts and resources you have on you, then obediently surrender and wait for us to make a trip." Ji Tianxing narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Blood Flame Divine Kingdom? Join the household register? 1,000 years ago, he had never heard of something like a household register in the God realm. The gods who had just ascended to the God realm were also free to come and go as they pleased. Seeing that he was confused, the leader of the Protoss said to the one-eyed Protoss beside him, Lin Yenshur explained to him. Captain, what's there to explain? Just take him down. The one-eyed Protoss grinned. He was too lazy to waste his breath. The captain chuckled and said, We are under orders to carry out a mission. Of course, we have to explain clearly before we take action. Otherwise, if these small fries mistakenly think that we are blocking the road and want to rob them, wouldn't it damage the dignity of the divine kingdom? All right. Lin Yenshur nodded helplessly. He stared at Ji Tianxing with his one-eyed Protoss and said arrogantly, Little brat, we are the Thunder Pool guards of the Blue Mountain City. We are under orders to guard the Thunder Pool. According to the law of the Blood Flame Divine Country, ascenders must surrender. You have to hand over all the resources and divine artifacts on you. Then, we will put the soul fixation spell on you and you will follow us to the Blue Mountain City's household register. Only when you are registered in the household register will you have a legal identity and become a slave of the Blood Flame Divine Country. Then, the city guards will bring you to the Blue Mountain Mine. There, you will be forced to work for 500 years. After you complete the mission, you will regain your freedom and become a lowly commoner of the Blue Mountain City. Lin Yenshur explained in a serious tone. He stared at Ji Tianxing and asked, Little brat, did you hear that clearly? Ji Tianxing turned a deaf ear to his words. The situation now was completely different from the divine world thousands of years ago. What household register, slaves, 500 years of forced labor and lowly commoners. These were all things that he had never heard of. No matter what, Ji Tianxing would not agree to it. In fact, he thought that it was ridiculous. He stared at the Thunder Pool Guard captain coldly and asked, Is this the rule of the Blood Flame Divine Country or the Great Yin Empire? The Thunder Pool Guard captain's body shook. He frowned and asked, Little brat, how do you know about the Great Yin Empire? How could a small fry that just ascended from the lower realm know about the Great Yin Empire? The Thunder Pool Guard captain calmed down and immediately thought of another question. This white-robed little brat in front of him had just ascended to the divine world and actually knew the divine world's common language? Ji Tianxing did not answer. He said coldly again, The Thunder Pool is formed by the will of the heavens. It does not belong to any divine country or power. The people that ascended from the Thunder Pool also do not belong to any divine country's people. What the Blood Flame Divine Country is doing is going against the will of the heavens. Did you get the approval of the Great Yin Empire? These righteous and high-spirited words stunned the 5 Thunder Pool guards. Ji Tianxing's body emitted an invisible pressure, which calmed them down and even made them fearful. The 5 of them were shocked and in disbelief. They stared at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes. After a while, the Thunder Pool Guard captain regained his senses. He sneered and said, Little brat, you are indeed interesting. You are much stronger than those useless ascenders. However, you are just a small true god. Don't try to intimidate us. To tell you the truth, this law was issued by the Great Yin Empire. The Thunder Pool is formed by the will of the heavens. But this place is our Blood Flame Divine Country's territory. You appearing here, standing on the Blood Flame Divine Country's territory, you are our Blood Flame Divine Country's slave. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows and was somewhat stunned in his heart. He muttered to himself, These few fellows are all level 5 celestial deity realm. How can they not perceive my strength realm? After thinking for a while, he understood the reason. It was definitely related to the Heaven-Mending Pearl. Most likely, the Heaven-Mending Pearl concealed his divine spark aura, isolating the 5 Thunder Pool Guards' divine sense probing. The 5 Thunder Pool Guards guarded this place all year round and had seen countless ascenders. They were all true God realm strength. Naturally, they determined that he was a true god too. Right at this time, the Thunder Pool Guard captain pulled out a black divine saber and pointed at Ji Tianqing as he said coldly, "Little brat, we have guarded the Thunder Pool for 100 years. The ascenders that we have seen before, if not 800, are at least 500. People who are more pretentious and more arrogant than you are too many to count. In the end, didn't they still surrender without putting up a fight? Don't waste time. This seat's patience is limited. Immediately hand over all divine artifacts and resources. Otherwise, this seat will kill you immediately and not even have the chance to be a slave." Chapter 2773. Following the Thunder Pool Guard captain's words, the other 4 Thunder Pool Guards all pulled out their swords and sabers, ready to attack. The atmosphere in the field immediately became tense. The 5 Thunder Pool Guards were filled with killing intent, releasing a strong pressure that enveloped Ji Tianqing. If it were other ascenders, with only the strength of a true god, they would immediately admit defeat. They would obediently give up their weapons and resources, and obediently go to the Blue Mountain Mine to do 500 years of hard labor. But Ji Tianqing did not move without any fear. He stared at the Thunder Pool Guard captain and asked coldly, "Are you sure you want to attack without any room for negotiation?" The Thunder Pool Guard captain laughed coldly, "Hee. Now you want to beg for mercy? It's too late. Kneel down and allow yourself to be captured." As he said that, he stepped across the sky, holding his saber and approaching Ji Tianqing. The pressure of an Empyrean god rushed over. Ji Tianqing did not speak, his right hand holding the Burial of Heaven sword, and handed it over to the Thunder Pool Guard captain. Seeing this, the Thunder Pool Guard captain was even more disdainful, his face full of disdain as he laughed coldly, "Hee. Pretentious dog, I will peel off your skin and send you to hard labor." After saying that, he was about to reach out and take the Burial of Heaven sword. The other 4 Thunder Pool Guards also revealed a mocking cold smile. But right at this time, Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword in his right hand, and suddenly stabbed towards the Thunder Pool Guard captain. Shwa! The dazzling golden sword light bloomed, like thunder breaking through the sky. From Ji Tianqing holding the sword to stabbing towards the Thunder Pool Guard captain, who was 20 feet away, it only took a quarter of an instant. That sword was extremely ruthless and decisive, and its speed was unbelievably fast. Sometimes the truly powerful sword technique did not lie in the beautiful move. Purring! Only a muffled sound could be heard. The Burial of Heaven sword instantly pierced through the red helmet, from the forehead of the Thunder Pool Guard captain, into his head. The dark red diamond-shaped divinity in his mind was pierced until it exploded on the spot. One sword kill. The Thunder Pool Guard captain didn't even have time to react, nor did he have time to dodge. He didn't even expect that Ji Tianqing would dare to assassinate him. Even at the moment of his death, the mocking sneer was still frozen on his face. The other 4 Thunder Pool Guards were shocked by Ji Tianqing's ruthlessness and decisiveness. They widened their eyes in horror. In the next moment, the 4 of them regained their senses and immediately brandished their swords and sabers at Ji Tianqing. "Bastard! You actually killed the captain! Damned reptile! You're dead meat! Die without a burial place! Everyone be careful! He's not a true god!" The 4 of them roared angrily as they executed their lost techniques and divine abilities to besiege Ji Tianqing. In an instant, Ji Tianqing's figure was engulfed by the flames and 5-colored divine light that blotted out the sky. Ji Tianqing didn't evade at all. Once again, he used his ultimate sword technique and stabbed out 36 times in an instant. Swish! Swish! He turned into a phantom and flickered in the crowd. The bright golden sword light lit up, drifting erratically, and its whereabouts were strange. Bang! 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 With a muffled sound, 2 of the 4 Thunder Pool Guards were instantly killed on the spot. One was hit in the forehead by a sword, and his divinity was destroyed by the Burial of Heaven. The other was hit in the back of the head by a sword. Half of his head was cut off, and his divinity was shattered. The two surviving Thunder Pool guards were sent flying by the sword light. The crimson armor was broken, and there were a few more wounds on the divine body. Blood flowed. The two of them fell more than 10 miles away. They were scared out of their wits and hurriedly turned to flee to the distant mountain peak. On that mountain peak there were dozens of palaces and houses, and a large number of Thunder Pool guards were stationed there. Help! An ascender resisted and killed Captain Lin. While the two of them fled desperately, they didn't forget to shout for help. Time was tight, and the two of them didn't have time to send a communication jade slip. What's more, the Thunder Pool guards' camp was just 500 miles away. Swish! In the next moment, Ji Tianxing teleported dozens of miles and caught up with one of the Thunder Pool guards. Swish! The burial of heaven stabbed out fiercely, and like a thunderbolt, it instantly pierced into the back of the Thunder Pool guard's head. Bang! The violent divine power exploded, blowing the person's head into pieces. A dark red diamond-shaped divinity, along with the blood and brain matter, spilled out and scattered on the grass. Ji Tianxing didn't stop. He teleported another 100 miles and caught up with the last Thunder Pool guard. Swish! He raised his hand and the sword fell. A bloody hole appeared in the back of the person's head, and his divinity was shattered on the spot. The burly corpse fell from the sky and smashed on the grass with a plop. Ji Tianxing glanced at the corpse and grabbed the spatial ring and broken divinity across the air. Then, he turned and flew to the other 4 corpses to seize the spatial ring and divinity fragment. He was very clear that the situation in the divine realm had changed. It was necessary to have a household registration to move around. And he had just arrived, so he had to accumulate wealth and resources as soon as possible to seize a large number of divinity crystals. Divinity crystals could be used for cultivation, and it was also the common currency in the divine realm. Without divinity crystals, it was difficult to move an inch. Swish! Ji Tianxing had just put away the 5 spatial rings and didn't have time to swallow the divinity fragment. On the mountain peak 500 miles away, dozens of divine lights had already lit up, and they were rushing over as fast as lightning. Obviously, the Thunder Pool guards in the camp were alarmed and were rushing over to support. Ji Tianxing turned around without hesitation and fled in the opposite direction. Burrow! He used the law of earth, and his figure flashed and burrowed into the ground, escaping as fast as lightning. After a short 10 breaths, he had escaped more than 5,000 miles and passed through more than a dozen mountain ranges. But the group of Thunder Pool guards in red armor locked onto his aura and relentlessly chased after him. The distance between the two sides was constantly closing, and they were only 300 miles apart. At the latest, dozens of Thunder Pool guards would catch up with Ji Tianxing in 100 breaths. At that time, he would definitely be besieged and in danger. Although he had all kinds of trump cards and ultimate skills, his combat strength was valiant. There were also Yunyao, Jiku, and the others who could help at any time. But this was the territory of the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom, and the great Yen Divine race could be seen everywhere. Once Ji Tianxing was surrounded, he would have to face an endless stream of enemies. Even if he had great divine powers, he would definitely die. The situation was getting more and more critical. Ji Tianxing could only unleash his full strength and use the power of the law of space to teleport thousands of miles away in an instant. Swish! A white light flashed. He crossed a few mountain ranges and appeared in the jungle thousands of miles away. The more than 30 Thunder Pool guards were temporarily shaken off, but they persevered and chased even more desperately. Moreover, they also sent out an emergency message to inform the nearby towns and cities to mobilize a large number of experts to surround and intercept him. Ji Tianxing had guessed this result. In desperation, he could only consume his divine power and teleport continuously in the sky. Swish! 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 Every time the white light flashed, he could teleport 500 miles away. When he was in the mortal world, he could teleport 1,000 miles away every time. Moreover, he could teleport 100 times in a row. But this was the divine realm, which was completely different from the mortal world. An ordinary 6th-level celestial god could only teleport 200 miles at a time. Teleporting 500 miles like him was already an extremely rare genius. Chapter 2774. Ji Tianxing kept running towards the west. 2 days later, he had flown more than 10 million miles. He had already left Blue Mountain City, far away from the lightning pool. All the lightning pool guards had been shaken off by him, disappearing without a trace. During this process, he passed by several towns and tribes, but he avoided them in advance. No one discovered him, and he didn't encounter any danger on the way. That evening, when the sun was setting, Ji Tianxing entered a vast mountain range and stopped to rest on a 1,000 feet tall mountain peak. He sat on a millstone at the peak of the 1,000 feet tall mountain. After circulating his energy and adjusting his breathing for a moment, he recovered to normal. If it was an ordinary god, continuously teleporting and flying over 10 million miles like him, it would consume at least half of his divine power. But he was different. His divine power was vigorous and majestic, like the sea. There was also the 5 elements world, which continuously provided him with divine power. Therefore, he was only a little mentally tired, and he would be fine after resting for a while. The sun set, and the surroundings became dark. The world was quiet, and one could vaguely hear the occasional beast roar from the distant mountains. Ji Tianxing ended his meditation and took out a few divine spark fragments. This was the divine spark of the lightning pool guard captain. Even though it was broken into 8 diamond-shaped crystals, it still emitted vigorous divine power. Ji Tianxing held the divine spark fragment in his left hand and silently released the devouring divine power. Suddenly, a black vortex the size of an egg appeared in his palm. The divine spark fragments were all swallowed by the vortex and melted at an extremely fast speed. Not long after, the 8 divine spark fragments were all swallowed, turning into violent divine power that entered the heaven-mending orb. The divine power was purified by the heaven-mending orb, removing all the impurities, leaving only 80% of the divine power. Then, the heaven-mending orb swallowed 40% of the divine power. The remaining 40% of the divine power was transferred to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's divine power was strengthened, and it quickly grew stronger. Moreover, he circulated his energy and found that the newly fused divine power didn't have any sluggishness or rejection. It perfectly fused with his divine power without any wastage. It was just like the divine power that he cultivated himself. This result made Ji Tianxing overjoyed. Great! It was the first time I used the devouring divine power. After being purified by the heaven-mending pearl, I was able to fuse it perfectly. In this way, not only can I increase my strength quickly, but there won't be any risks. He hurriedly took out the other 4 quintessence fragments and used the black vortex to devour them one by one. Half an hour later, he had devoured all 4 Godhead fragments. Half of the divine power that had been purified by the heaven-mending orb was refined by him, while the other half was devoured by the heaven-mending orb. He could clearly feel that his strength had increased by 20%. The power of the heaven-mending pearl had also increased slightly. Even though he was still very far from the 7th level of the celestial god realm, this was a perfect start. He believed that before long, he could advance to the 7th level celestial deity realm. When Ji Tianxing finished his cultivation, night had already fallen. He sat on the millstone and looked up at the starry sky. He murmured, "Next, I have to find a way to enter the city. I can't stay in the wilderness forever. I have to familiarize myself with this unfamiliar god realm as soon as possible and search for more clues." As soon as he finished speaking, A cold laugh filled with killing intent came from the night sky 100 miles behind him. An ant that's going to die for sure, still thinking so much? This was the voice of a middle-aged man. Cold, sharp, like ice shards, making people feel a bone-piercing chill. Ji Tianqing suddenly got up, his right hand gripping the sword of burial of heaven, his eyes looking coldly at the night sky, only to see a streak of crimson-red light suddenly appear in the gloomy sky. Swoosh! 3 dark red divine swords that were more than 10 feet long pierced down from the sky, aiming straight for Ji Tianqing's vital points. Those 3 divine swords were all surrounded by crimson flames, illuminating the night sky within a radius of 100 miles. Before the divine swords arrived, an unparalleled violent sword intent attacked, locking onto Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing executed the Big Dipper step, his figure flickering 3 times in a row, dodging the attacks of the 3 divine swords. Of course, those 3 divine swords all brushed past him. The scorching and violent divine flames were practically about to ignite his white robe and long hair. Bam! 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 Following 3 muffled explosions, the 3 divine swords stabbed into the grassland on the mountain peak loudly, arranged in a triangular formation, and Ji Tianqing was right in the middle of the 3 divine swords. Swoosh! A white light flashed. A middle-aged man more than 10 feet tall descended from the night sky, landing 1,000 feet in front of Ji Tianqing. This person was dark red all over, his facial features sunken, and his eyes sinister. He wore black armor, with a dark red wide cloak draped over his shoulders, and a pair of pitch-black, ferocious combat boots on his feet. As soon as he landed, his entire body burst forth with an invisible divine power, enveloping a radius of 100 miles. All of a sudden, this area was sealed by him. There was no wind blowing or grass moving, even the air froze. Ji Tianqing looked over with a cold gaze, glanced at the badge on his chest, and recognized this person's identity. The leader of the Thunder Pool Guards, 9th level Celestial Deity Realm. Your Excellency is not simple, to actually be able to track thousands of miles, Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly. The middle-aged man stared at him like lightning, and said in a deep voice, "This seat is Lin Wuji, Blue Mountain City Guard Qian who, in charge of the Thunder Pool Guards. In the past 100 years, this seat has seen more than 400 ascenders. Those who dared to resist and escape after killing the Thunder Pool Guards, there were only 3. To be able to escape Blue Mountain City's range, worthy of this seat personally pursuing, only you alone." Lin Wuji's voice was like a great bell, saying with an imposing manner, "You killed 5 Thunder Pool Guards, you're already dead for sure. Before killing you, this seat has a question." Ji Tianqing sneered, "You're going to die soon, why ask so much?" Lin Wuji frowned fiercely, his golden eyes flashing with a cold light, and said with a cold smile, "Ha ha ha. You're very confident. This seat understands ascenders who can successfully enter the divine realm, which one isn't a formidable character and overlord of a region. It's just a pity that you met this seat. No matter how confident you are, it's hard to escape death." Finished talking, Lin Wuji did not talk nonsense anymore and asked straightforwardly, "You can kill 5 Thunder Pool Guards and escape here within 2 days. This shows that you have at least 7th level Celestial Deity Realm strength. But you're an ascender who just stepped out of the lightning pool. It's absolutely impossible to reach 7th level Celestial Deity Realm. There's only one explanation. You're very lucky, obtaining a Heavenly Tao lucky chance in the lightning pool. Hand it over. This seat will spare you from death." Lin Wuji's tone was very certain, and it was filled with a domineering determination to get it. Ji Tianqing raised his brows and said with a ruminating smile, "You're very good, to actually be able to deduce this level of reason. But very sadly, I'm not as lucky as you think. What Heavenly Tao lucky chance? I've never heard of it." Ji Tianqing denied flatly. Because he borrowed Earth Law and sensed another obscure powerhouse's aura. It was in that deep ravine 200 miles away, and it was very well hidden. Being in a place where danger lurked everywhere, he had to be vigilant. Lin Wuji naturally did not believe and laughed contemptuously as he said, "Ha ha! Brat, since you don't admit it, then this seat will kill you, then search for you personally. But this seat still advises you, the surrounding 500 million miles is my blood flame divine kingdom's territory. It's already closed in from all directions. You can't escape even if you grow wings, with absolutely no hope of escaping." Chapter 2775. You talk too much. Ji Tianqing glanced at Lin Wuji and said in a low voice, "Ha ha! Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Lin Wuji laughed maniacally again. With a thought, he manipulated the two flaming divine swords and stabbed them at Ji Tianqing as fast as light. The other flaming sword flew into his hand. His left hand shot out a sky full of flames while his right hand waved the sword. In a flash, he was in front of Ji Tianqing. A level 9 celestial god was indeed powerful. However, Ji Tianqing's strength was not any weaker than his celestial dragon tyrant body. Ji Tianqing's body glowed with golden light. In an instant, he turned into a 300-meter-tall giant. His blood was boiling and his divine power was surging. His combat power increased by 6 times in an instant. He swept out his left palm and slapped the two flaming swords away. He waved the burial of heaven in his right hand and attacked Lin Wuji violently. The lightning sword light that covered the sky and covered the earth poured down like a torrential rain. Bam! 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 Lin Wuji's sword Dao Mystique was completely defeated. After exchanging a few moves, Lin Wuji was forced to retreat continuously, attacking less and defending more. Ji Tianqing was like a ferocious ancient beast, completely suppressing Lin Wuji in his most ferocious and domineering manner. Lin Wuji was shocked and used his mystique in anger. Soaring crimson flames. He ignited his divine blood, and divine flames burst out from his body. He also turned into a giant that was hundreds of meters tall. His body was dark red like blood jade, and the golden divine bones inside could be seen clearly. There were thousands of blood flames flowing inside. The two of them fought fiercely with all their might, shaking the earth and filling the sky with sparks. After a short 100 breaths, everything within 100 miles was flattened and the mountains in the distance were turned into a sea of fire. The divine power hidden in the dark retreated 150 miles and continued to hide. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Lin Wuji was forced to retreat again and again. There were more than 20 wounds on his body, and his god blood spurted out. Ji Tianqing seized the opportunity to slash apart a flaming sword and landed a punch on Lin Wuji. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. The mountain-sized dragon elephant phantom crashed into Lin Wuji and sent him flying hundreds of miles away, smashing into half a mountain. Lin Wuji crawled up from the rubble. He was already heavily injured, blood spurting out from his 7 orifices. Between his chest and abdomen, there was a large hole where divine blood flowed out. Impossible! This was absolutely impossible! He's just a reptile that just ascended. Even if he obtained the heavenly Tao's opportunity, it's impossible for him to be so powerful. Lin Wuji was shocked and enraged at the same time, roaring like a madman. He could not believe that Ji Tianqing, who had just ascended for 2 days, already had the strength of a 9th-level heavenly god and severely injured him. Such a miracle was too absurd. But on second thought, Lin Wuji knew that it must have been caused by the heavenly Tao. Exactly what fortuitous encounter of the heavenly Tao did this animal obtain to actually be so formidable? No way. I can't die. I must report this secret to the city lord and the monarch. Thinking of this, Lin Wuji did not continue fighting. After feinting 2 moves, he turned and fled. Just as he pulled away from Ji Tianqing, he could not wait to take out his communication jade slip and send out a message. Whoosh! The dark red jade slip flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After sending out the communication jade slip, Lin Wuji heaved a sigh of relief and continued to teleport away. However, he had just teleported 400 miles and appeared on the peak of a mountain. Suddenly, a shocking saber light slashed over from the side, right above his head. Damn it! He actually has an accomplice? Lin Wuji was shocked and instinctively waved his two swords to block that shocking saber light. Kaboom! Amidst the deafening loud noise, the dark green saber light that was thousands of feet long was shattered into pieces. Lin Wuji was also smashed into the mountain. His arms could not stop trembling and he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. The mountain below his feet was shattered into pieces and more than half of it collapsed. He was buried in the ruins and countless rocks and soil poured down. Before he could fly out, Ji Tianxing had already charged over with his sword. Earth, imprisonment. Ji Tianxing used the law of earth and enveloped the collapsed mountain. The mountain within 100 miles was instantly compressed into a 10-mile golden mountain and imprisoned Lin Wuji. Then, Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed down from the sky. Sky-splitting sword. The dazzling golden sword light that was thousands of feet long slashed down with rolling thunder. Lin Wuji struggled and raised his two swords to block, slashing out dozens of flaming swords. Bang! 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 However, those flaming swords were all shattered into pieces. The sword of burial of heaven was unstoppable and hit Lin Wuji with a boom. Immediately, metal and stone splashed and dark red divine blood splattered. Lin Wuji's giant head was split in half by the sword of burial of heaven. Swoosh! A dark red, diamond-shaped godhead flew toward the east at the highest speed possible, along with the blood and minced flesh that filled the sky. However, another blade light slashed from the dark and intercepted Lin Wuji's godhead. Boom! With a muffled sound, the blade light suddenly exploded. Lin Wuji's godhead also flew back, its light much dimmer. Ji Tianxing took the opportunity to swing his sword and slash down with all his strength. Crack! With a crisp explosion, Lin Wuji's godhead was hit by the sword of burial of heaven and exploded into dozens of pieces. Before those pieces fell to the ground, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and captured all the godhead pieces. After putting away the godhead pieces, he turned around and flew away without hesitation, wanting to leave this place. At this moment, a green-robed figure flew out of the darkness and shouted, "Brother, please wait." Ji Tianxing turned a deaf ear to him and teleported to the west. Even though the green-robed figure had helped him kill Lin Wuji, he knew that the green-robed figure had to have some ulterior motive. They didn't know each other, so he didn't need to be entangled with him. Moreover, the battle here was so loud that it could be sensed from thousands of miles away. He had to leave this place as soon as possible, or he would be surrounded by a large group of experts. Swish! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianxing teleported thousands of miles away and disappeared into the darkness. "Why don't you trust me at all?" The green-robed figure smiled bitterly and quickly teleported to chase after him. After 100 seconds, both of them had teleported tens of thousands of miles away. However, the green-robed figure was getting further and further away from Ji Tianxing. He had no choice but to take out a greenwood compass and use his ultimate skill. Distance shrink. Swish! With a flash of light, the green-robed figure crossed 8,000 miles and appeared on a mountain peak. He held the greenwood compass in his left hand and put his right hand behind his back. He stood in the sky with a smile and looked at the night sky in the west. After 3 short breaths, swish! Ji Tianxing teleported and appeared in front of the green-robed figure. They were thousands of feet apart. The green-robed figure smiled and said, "Brother, why do you have to be so distant? I mean you no harm, and I even helped you kill Lin Wuji just now. Why don't you stay for 100 seconds and we can talk?" Chapter 2776. Ji Tianxing stared at the green-robed figure expressionlessly, not speaking. This was a divine race youth with a handsome face and a tall figure. This person was more than 2 meters tall, with a fair complexion, a high nose bridge, and a pair of azure blue eyes. A head of dark green hair draped over his shoulders, covering more than half of a pair of pointy ears. Pure white and slender hands had 6 fingers, and the nails were dark green in color. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment. This divine race youth seemed to be from the Azure Forest clan. 10,000 years ago, the Azure Forest clan spread across the 4 continents of the divine realm. They were very prosperous, with as many as 10 billion people. Among the myriad races of the divine realm, the Azure Forest clan once ranked in the top 100. As long as there were forests, flowers, and trees, there was a possibility of seeing the Azure Forest clan. But, because of many reasons, the Azure Forest clan started to decline several thousand years ago. 1,000 years ago, the glorious Azure Forest clan declined to the extreme, fading out of the vision of countless divine beings. Ji Tianqing also did not expect that he would actually encounter a Azure Forest clan here. Furthermore, it was a relatively young youth with outstanding talent. His strength reached level 8 celestial deity realm. At the same time that Ji Tianqing sized up the green-robed youth, the other party was also sizing him up. His eyes were filled with praise and admiration. The 2 people were silent. After 10 breaths, the green-robed youth finally clasped his hands and bowed, taking the initiative to speak. "This brother, I'm Zhu Qingqing. Greetings." Ji Tianqing just nodded slightly and did not report his name. Instead, he asked, "Zhu Qingqing, if I didn't guess wrongly, you should be from the Azure Forest clan. Speak, what faction is behind you, and who are you representing to find me?" Zhu Qingqing was stunned and asked in disbelief, "Brother, you actually know about the Azure Forest clan?" He was simply stunned. If not for seeing Ji Tianqing step out of the lightning pool with his own eyes, he would have thought that Ji Tianqing had already been in the divine realm for many years. How could an ascender who just entered the divine realm possibly know about the Azure Forest clan? Something strange. There must be something strange. Zhu Qingqing was filled with shock, becoming even more determined to rope in Ji Tianqing. He bowed to Ji Tianqing again and said, "Brother's insight is like a torch. Qingqing admires you greatly. Brother, you're right. I'm a citizen of the Qinglin clan. Tonight, I passed by this place and coincidentally saw you fighting with Lin Wuji. I felt like an old friend to you at first sight, so I decided to help you. I'm just a wild crane, I don't represent any power." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and sneered, "Ha ha! Would idle clouds and wild cranes be hiding near the lightning pool and follow me all the way here? Forget it, since you don't have any sincerity, then we have nothing to talk about." With that, he turned to leave. Zhu Qingqing was shocked again. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Indeed, Ji Tianqing was right. Previously, he had been keeping watch near the lightning pool, secretly following Ji Tianqing here. When he saw Lin Wuji chasing after him, he hid at the side. He waited until the crucial moment to kill Ji Tianqing. He wanted Ji Tianqing to owe him a favor. This way, he would be able to quickly gain Ji Tianqing's trust. But he didn't expect that Ji Tianqing had already seen through all of this. Zhu Qingqing was shocked and embarrassed. He hurriedly waved his hand and shouted, "Brother, please wait. Please listen to my explanation. I didn't mean to hide it. It's just that the power behind me is somewhat special. You're so wary of me, how would I dare to tell you?" As he spoke, his figure flashed and flew in front of Ji Tianqing, blocking his path again. "Brother, please give me another chance. I won't hide it anymore." Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said, "Speak." Zhu Qingqing tidied his green robe and long hair. He transmitted his voice, "Brother, I can tell you my true identity and purpose of coming here. But before that, I would like to ask you to tell me your name." "Tianqing." Ji Tianqing said indifferently. "Brother Tianqing." Zhu Qingqing cupped his fists and transmitted his voice, "To be honest, I'm from the Origin Returning Association. I'm the External Affairs Emissary of the Origin Returning Association. I'm in charge of rescuing the Ascenders of Blue Mountain City. Other than that, I have another mission, which is to rescue and gather the enemies of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom. Origin Returning Association? Rescue the Ascenders? Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow. Zhu Qingqing nodded and said, "That's right. 100 years ago, a lightning pool appeared outside Blue Mountain City. The Bloodfire Divine Kingdom immediately ordered a large number of guards to guard it. Any Ascenders who walked out of the lightning pool were captured by Blue Mountain City and forced to work in the mines. After working for 500 years, they would be given a lowly status in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom. This law was issued by the Great Yen Empire and had been implemented 800 years ago. Moreover, the citizens of the Great Yen Empire are divided into 3 classes. The first class Great Yen Divine Race has the highest status. The other divine races are the second class. The Ascenders from the lower realms are the third class. They have the lowest status." Ji Tianqing immediately understood what he meant. He continued, "Therefore, many divine races resisted this move, especially the Ascenders from the lower realms." Zhu Qingqing nodded and said, "That's right. Over the past 100 years, Blue Mountain City has captured more than 400 Ascenders. Half of them are forced to work in the mines while the other half are resisting fiercely. Many Ascenders risked their lives and tried to escape the mines. Some Ascenders were like you. They resisted as soon as they walked out of the lightning pool. As for the other divine races, not all of them were against it. Many of them muddled through and tried to curry favor with the Great Yen Divine Race so that they could live comfortably. Only a small number of divine races were suppressed and massacred by the Great Yen Divine Race and formed a blood feud. That's why they resisted with all their might." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and asked, "In that case, the Greenwood tribe was massacred and formed a blood feud with the Great Yen Divine Race?" "Yes." Zhu Qingqing explained, "More than 2,000 years ago, there were thousands of Greenwood tribes and millions of Greenwood tribe members in the Great Yen Empire. But now, there's not a single Greenwood tribe. There are less than 100 Greenwood tribe members who are still alive." Ji Tianqing asked again, "How many people are there in the Origin Returning Association? Do they all have a blood feud with the Great Yen Divine Race?" Zhu Qingqing nodded. "Currently, there are more than 300 of them. More than 60 of them are Ascenders we rescued. The remaining 200 or so are all divine races who were persecuted by the Great Yen Divine Race." Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and said, "The Origin Returning Association's base is in the Bloodflame Divine Nation? You dare to go against the Great Yen Divine Race with so few of you? I'm afraid Blue Mountain City only needs to send 1,000 city guards to annihilate all of you, right?" Zhu Qingqing was stumped by his words. She smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Tianqing, you can't say that. Although there aren't many of us in the Origin Returning Association, we're all elite. Especially our 2 chairmen and 4 great elders, they are all divine Lord Realm powerhouses. Of course, our current goal isn't to go against the Great Yen Divine Race. Our main goal is to provide a safe haven for those who were persecuted by the Great Yen Divine Race.